It definitely is. Shao-Chi nodded firmly. If you've ever played virtual games you would know how frightening the value of the first guild creation token is, especially as the value of the second token is far off from the first token. Also, due to the fact that the guild leaderboard only shows 10 names, the first 10 guild creation token all have rather high values. After the 10th, the value of the tokens drops drastically. Is that so? Ling Chen had never been involved in the establishment of guilds and alliances, hence his limited knowledge in the area. From Yunmeng Xian and Shao-Chi's description, this first token's value seemed to be higher than what he had imagined, a lot higher. He thought for a moment and suddenly said, "Hey guys, if we, Heart's Dream, became the first guild, what would happen?" Huh? Several girls simultaneously exclaimed. This was something they had never thought about. "It'll make our reputation skyrocket to the very top," Yunmeng Xian said, but shook her head immediately after. "But even if it really is possible, we definitely cannot do this, to dare let our position be above of Yan Huang Alliance and Skyfall Dynasty while we don't have the actual ability. Although it's dazzling for a while, the result will definitely be," she trailed off. "We'll be destroyed by those major alliances and get replaced, right?" Ling Chen finished. Right now, Xing Meng's members only consisted of the few of them. It would literally be child's play if any of the alliances with easily 100, if not millions, of members were to destroy Heart's Dream right now. He had asked that question knowing that Yunmeng Xian would have that answer, which, in itself was irrefutable. Although his and Mu Bingyao's individual abilities are strong, large forces like Yan Huang Alliance could easily destroy Heart's Dream if they wished. It would be impossible for them to be saved even if there were 100 copies of him. Shao-Chi lifted her face slightly, her expression full of yearning. "But if we really became the first guild, even if it was for just a day, or a moment, it's still something that'll make me lose sleep over excitement. Even if we were destroyed immediately, if it actually happens, we would still be remembered by all players for a long, long time. The only thing is, if Yan Huang Alliance and Skyfall Dynasty couldn't find the token even when they have so many people, we have no chance of finding it before them." "Oh yeah, Big Brother Ling Tian, why did you ask that question just then?" "Is it possible that?" Ling Chen smiled and shook his head. "I was just saying. Okay, currency exchange opens tomorrow. Meng Xian should have lots of important things to prepare, right? I also need to go challenge the final mega quest. Well, let's not delay, call me if anything comes up." "Alright. Before we make preparations, we need to finish the quest for finding red crystal grass first. Big Brother Ling Tian, I'm cheering for you. You're super powerful, so you can definitely finish the 4th mega quest. I have faith in you," Shao-Chi proclaimed, waving her fist at him to cheer him on. After completing the Forest of Bones quest, every player would try imagining just how messed up the 4th mega quest, whose difficulty level is labeled as too high to be measured, would be. But that's all they would ever remain, just imaginings, since throughout the whole China, Ling Chen was the only person who can carry out this quest. One thing's for sure, this quest was definitely messed up to the extreme. "You can do it, Big Brother Ling Tian," Su'er said to Ling Chen softly from her position next to Shao-Chi. She punctuated this encouragement by imitating Shao-Chi's earlier actions. Ling Chen gave Rua the starry robe from the Collect Red Crystal Grass quest and the white bone chain from the Forest of Bones. Rua, you should stay with them today," he told her, "and pay attention to safety. If anything happens, you must call me immediately, understood?" "Okay Big Brother, you have to work hard as well." Yunmeng Xian and the girls went off to continue their unfinished 2nd mega quest. Ling Chen walked out of the residential area and went on to the streets. Feeling his backpack, he clenched his jaw, depressed. All his gold coins were taken by the lucky cat back at the forest region, leaving him penniless. The monsters in Forest of Bones didn't even drop a copper coin, hence the amount of money he had in his backpack since yesterday had been 0. The saddest thing was that he wouldn't even be able to afford a potion. Should I go rustle up some money? Ling Chen said to himself. However, without Shi Ling, he lacked one of the main constituents of his no-cost, no-risk, high-return money-making machine. If he did all the work himself, not only would the efficiency be much lower than with Shi Ling, but he would also have to waste large amounts of time and energy. Buying a mount was a must, and it had to be the best cloud-stepping mare. This way, he would have more of a chance when he once again challenged the warring palace skeleton. It was also absolutely crucial that he had a mount for the Moon God Ruins quest, but a single cloud-stepping mare cost a whole 20,000 gold pieces. After pondering for a while, he turned around and walked towards the mayor's residence. "Mr. Mayor, I've lately been a bit short on gold coins, so would it be possible for you to lend me a few?" Ling Chen got straight to the point. "I'll return them within 3 days along with the interest." Lend money? The Azure Dragon's mayor gave him a doubtful stare. Borrowing money from the dignified Azure Dragon's mayor? This was the first time in his life that someone had asked him. "All right," he conceded. "How much?" 100,000 gold coins." Ling Chen didn't dare to say more. "Damn! 100,000? My monthly salary is barely 10,000 gold coins. My son is also suffering from a serious illness at the moment, right when I need money the most." Ling Chen's mouth twitched, and immediately interrupted him. "Dear Mr. Mayor, don't complain about poverty in front of me. You just took 2 million gold coins from me 2 days ago, 2 million. Don't you dare tell me you've already used it all up this quickly. I'm only borrowing 100,000 gold coins. You have to know, the land I rent out to you doesn't belong to me, and those gold coins are all turned over to the higher authorities. It has absolutely nothing to do with me." "All right," Ling Chen grudgingly took out his lease contract. "I'll borrow 10,000 gold coins from you, and I promise to return 20,000 within 3 days. This should be fine, right? If you're worried, I'll leave my land lease here as collateral. It's worth 20,000. Deep down, Ling Chen's had already cursed the lucky cat 108,000 times. If it wasn't for the cat, he wouldn't have had to go as far as to borrow money from the stingy mayor. Borrow 10,000 and return 20,000 within 3 days? The Azure Dragon's mayor's eyes suddenly lit up, becoming brighter than light bulbs. Seeing Ling Chen's sincerity, he smiled and said, "Do you swear you'll fulfill your promise?" "Definitely." Ling Chen vowed solemnly and nodded. "All right, then I'll lend you 200,000. Remember to return 400,000 within the next 3 days, ha. Come, hand over your land lease. Here's the gold coins." "Oh hee, take it, there's no need to be polite with me." Ling Chen was speechless. Walking out of the mayor's residence, Ling Chen had successfully gained a loan of 200,000 gold coins, but he now also had a debt of 400,000. First he arrived at the mount shop and spent 20,000 gold coins on a cloud-stepping mare. Then he went to the tool shop and replenished his supply of purple potions. Purple potions were considered luxury items at this stage, and a single bottle cost 5 silver coins. One bottle is said to instantly replenish 400 magic points. At this current stage, it is impossible for physical occupation's MP to reach 400, however Ling Chen is obviously an exception, and his MP so far has graced 590. After that, Ling Chen held up a map, and after some searching, he finally found a toy store at the corner of the shopping street. The toy store sold various styles and types of toys. Of course, this included all sorts of dolls and puppets that mainly appealed to younger female players. After all, men have no use for such feminine objects. After Ling Chen walked into the shop, many splendid things crossed his eyes. He walked straight to the section where they sold dolls. Here, there were dolls in an array of colors, sizes, and shapes. Ling Chen was dazzled by their variety. Price-wise, the cheap ones cost only a few gold coins, while the more expensive ones added up to several thousand gold coins. Who knew what special effect they had or what material these were made out of? Hello, dear player, may I ask what type of doll you seek? Seeing Ling Chen looking at those dolls with such a serious expression, the beautiful saleswoman came up and smiled. The half-spirit girl in White Bones Forest was hugging a bunny doll that was all worn out. Who knew from whence she found it? He thought for a while, but he didn't even know what types the girl liked, so he just picked a few with relatively low prices. This one, and this one. Alright, the total is 120 gold coins. One beautiful puppet doll, one fox doll and one teddy bear. Ling Chen put them away in his backpack, preparing to leave. Unknowingly, he saw a little box placed in a glass cabinet in the middle of the toy shop. The little box was light silver and gave off such a warm glow that you couldn't help but gaze at the light. Ling Chen's gaze stayed on the little box for a while before asking, "What's this little box?" The saleswoman smiled and said, "This is the prized treasure of our shop. It's called Moonlight Treasure Box. When the box opens, it releases a ray of light as beautiful as the moon. Also, within the moonlight lies a surprise." Surprise? Would you like me to show you, sir? The saleswoman said with a smile as she walked over and stood in front of the glass cabinet. She had, in fact, already shown it to many players, but because of its price not being conventionally affordable, there has yet been a single player keen to purchasing it. Ling Chen nodded without refusal. Did you know? If all of our readers clicked just one adf.ly button every day, there would be at least one bonus chapter every week. Rua, Ling Chen couldn't help but whisper out loud. The image within the moonlight had turned out to be Shui Rua's smile. After hearing what Ling Chen let out uncontrollably, the saleswoman smiled. "I believe you must have seen the most beautiful picture. Am I right?" According to legends, dwarves made the moonlight box with the purest moonlight stone and the world's only piece of heart-calling stone. Not only does it radiate the most beautiful moonlight, it also reflects the image of the person one loves and longs for the most. Therefore, to every single person, the image they see in the moonlight box is the world's most beautiful image. For Ling Chen, that was indeed the world's most beautiful and flawless picture. "How many gold coins is this moonlight box?" Ling Chen asked. This moonlight box was certainly magical, much similar to the objects that appeared in fairy tales. A moonlight box like this couldn't be called a toy. If he could obtain it, it meant that even when Shui Rua wasn't beside him, he would still be able to see her wherever and whenever. Almost every player who had seen the mystical moonlight box before had felt a pressing urge to buy it and had immediately asked for its price. Ling Chen was no exception. The saleswoman didn't find this strange at all. She simply smiled and revealed its price. There is only one moonlight box throughout the entire mystic moon land. You could say that it's one of the most valuable treasures in the land. If you would like to buy it, sir, you'd have to pay 500,000 gold coins. 500,000 gold coins. That's not just expensive, it's simply expensive. Although, considering its magic, this price doesn't seem to be too much. Ling Chen believed that there must be countless players who wanted to purchase it, but because pretty much no one could take out 500,000 gold coins, no one had bought it so far. After today it would be different. Once the currency exchange system is established, those who wished to buy it would definitely rush here and purchase it. Without another word, Ling Chen rushed out of the toy store and headed straight towards the mayor's residence. "Mr. Mayor, lend me more money. Are you still returning double the amount within 3 days?" "That's right. Returning double within 3 days. My land lease I swapped for 2 million is still in your possession. I wouldn't forfeit that no matter what." Alright, how much are you borrowing?" 500,000. "Deal. Take it. Don't be polite with your brother. Remember to return 1.4 million within 3 days, ha." Walking out of the Castellan mansion, Ling Chen's debt had now risen to 1.4 million, and he would have to pay this off within 3 days. Although from his expression, he didn't seem too concerned. After getting 500,000 gold coins from the Azure Dragon's mayor, Ling Chen quickly returned to the toy store and took out the 500,000 gold coins he just obtained. Here's 500,000. This Moonlight box, I'm taking it. Spending so much money to buy a toy, this was the first time that Ling Chen did something like this. The money used to buy the toy was even obtained through usury. However, there wasn't the slightest hesitation or doubt when he made the payment. 500,000 gold coins in exchange for seeing Shura's smile anytime anywhere, this was simply the world's most worthwhile bargain to him. After selling the shop's prized treasure, the beautiful saleswoman beamed, "Mr. Congratulations on purchasing the world's most beautiful treasure, I believe that you will never regret it. Also, because you spent over 100,000 at our shop, you have become our shop's honorable platinum customer. If you shop at our store in the future, all merchandises will be 15% off, I'm looking forward to your next visit." Walking out of the toy store, Ling Chen held the Moonlight box in his hands. He couldn't help but to open the box again and again, and seeing Shura smiling in the gentle moonlight, he couldn't help but smile as well. Ling Chen was so unwilling to move his sight from the box, let alone close it, and so focused he was at looking that he didn't actually do so until his head bumped into the wall. Ling Chen spent the whole morning walking around Azure Dragon City, ordering equipment and crystals at a consignment shop. Lastly, he arrived at the central auction house. Not long after Ling Chen exited the Azure Dragon City auction house, shocking news came out of the speakers, causing an instant uproar amongst all the players. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, Azure Dragon City Auction House will hold its first large-scale auction to all players. This news caught all the players' attention, but didn't cause as much commotion compared to what came next. The crucial news was the list of items that would be up for auctioning. This auction definitely won't disappoint anyone and will auction off items that astonish you. High-grade items that you dream of having, as well as a guild creation token, will be up for auction. Guild creation token. Those 3 words were enough to cause a tidal wave. This wasn't news from an auction house set up by players, but Azure Dragon City's auction house, which meant it couldn't possibly have any falseness. Tomorrow this auction house would put up the first guild creation token for auction. This was the first news concerning guild creation tokens that players had received so far. That's right, the first guild creation token would soon appear, and at an auction no less. If anyone could win this guild creation token, they would become China's first official guild in the Mystic Moon world. The guild creation token only dropped from boss with grades no lower than Lord level. The chance for a guild creation token to come from a Lord boss lower than LV20 was very little. Some players even thought it impossible to obtain a guild creation token from a Lord boss. As such, no one had even heard of a guild creation token appearing, not even the Yan Huang Alliance or the Skyfall Dynasty. The Azure Dragon City Central Auction House was only open to players, which meant that this guild creation token also came from a player. All the players could not imagine as to who would have had such heaven-defying luck as to obtain the first guild creation token so quickly. Even an idiot would know that the first guild creation token could fetch them an astronomical price. The big guilds were all fighting like rabid dogs over the first guild creation token. For them, the fame from being the first official guild was a lot more important than money. Countless players began speculating which master currently possessed the guild creation token, and which force it would later belong to. This news is true. After hearing the news, Long Tianyun's expression completely changed, his eyes flashing. Absolutely true. This news is from the central auction house, it definitely wouldn't be fake. I believe that it won't be long before all players know. A guild creation token appearing this fast, I actually did not expect this. Yun Tian Long squinted slightly. He supported his chin with hand and pondered for a while before saying in a low voice, "Do you know who put up that guild creation token up for auction?" "Don't know." We tried asking, but the auction house does not reveal any information about the auctioneer. This isn't important at the moment. Long Tianyun's expression became serious. Tonight, the currency exchange system will be established, go do the preparations now. In tomorrow's auction, we must win that guild creation token. I'd like to see who dares to fight over the first guild position with us. Understood, we have already started preparing. On another note, the land east to the central square is in fact idle, it should be specially freed out by the system for players. Long Tianyun nodded and said deeply, then, you should know how high the value for that land is, now go find and negotiate with the related NPCs. No matter how expensive it is, be sure to obtain the land. This. Young master, I just asked about the ownership of that land before, and was told the land has been temporarily leased to a player. As to who, I was unable to find out. Long Tianyun showed a surprised expression. After the surprised moment passed, his eyebrows dropped. If it was obtained by an NPC, it's not that strange, but if it's obtained by a player, that would be too abnormal. Right now gold coins are so scarce, that to get that land, even if it's a temporary rental, it would cost a lot of money. Who can possibly take down that piece of land? Could it be the Skyfall dynasty? No, the Skyfall dynasty can be ruled out, because they're also investigating who has that land. Also, I sent people to secretly check the top 10 forces, there were no signs of them occupying that land. Long Tianyun pondered for a while. After some time, he waved, whoever the land belongs to, it'll be clear after the currency exchange system establishes. The person who has the land won't just leave it as it is, and when the time comes, no matter what we have to do, we must obtain that piece of land. If we can occupy that position, we will have the perfect start in this world. But we'll put this matter aside temporarily. Right now we need to put all our energy into competing for the guild creation token tomorrow. We must obtain it. Understood, young master, I'll handle it right away. In the quiet lobby, Long Tianyun was the only person. He was sitting in a chair, fingers slowly knocking the cold hard table, making a doke knocking sound. He maintained the same motion for a long time and seemed to be thinking deeply about something. Looks like, someone wants to know what it feels like to step above us, Yan Huang Alliance. Long Tianyun's eyes became slits, his lips revealing a calm, yet sinister smile. Next to him, a figure fully wrapped inside a cape stood unmovingly, just like a gray statue. If you enjoy reading Shura's Wrath, please consider whitelisting our site, ChinaNovel.net, on your ad block. The ad revenue really helps us out a lot, and the ads are not intrusive at all. Returning to the mystic moon world, Ling Chen looked over the description of the Moon God Ruins quest again and again. He had originally wanted to find the Azure Dragon's mayor to ask for some extra information about the Moon God Ruins. However, after thinking about it, he decided against it. After all, the Moon God Ruins were another of the forbidden areas, so even if he asked, he wouldn't get much out of it. Ling Chen had experienced many dangers in the Forest of Bones, and had even lost Shi Ling. From the description of the Moon God Ruins, it had been made out to be vastly harder than the Forest of Bones. Ling Chen knew that the smartest choice was to wait until he was at a higher level with better equipment. Otherwise, going into this significantly harder quest without Shi Ling would be equivalent to suicide. However, if Ling Chen waited, he would no longer be Ling Chen. Being overly cautious and indecisive was not his style. At the same time, the greater the difficulty, the greater the rewards. If he completed the quest after waiting for a long time, the rewards he would receive may not be any help to him anymore at that stage of the game. The Moon God Ruins quest was one that directly transported the challengers to the location of the quest. After looking at the description one more time, he said in a low voice, "Shi Ling, wait for me to complete this quest, afterwards, I'll head to the Vermilion Bird City in the south to find the Vermilion Bird." Afterwards, he selected the transport option, and after a white light flashed, the scenery around him changed. Ding, you have arrived in the danger zone, Moon God Ruins. Moon God Ruins, 10,000 years ago, a catastrophe called the Shura's devastation occurred. Because of mankind's constant modernization and updating of history, this event has long since been forgotten by the humans. However, the Moon God clan will never forget this catastrophe. This is because in that event, 30 moon gods were slain by the Shura. After a tragic and horrifying battle, the Moon God clan finally killed the Shura at the place the 30 moon gods had died at. However, because of the severity of the battle, the surrounding area was reduced to ruins. Afterwards, that place was called the Moon God Ruins, and the bodies of the moon gods that had been slain, as well as the Shura, were buried there. From then onwards, the Moon God clan has never entered that place. Afterwards, sounds of mournful weeping often came from the Moon God Ruins, and it was rumored that it was the spirits of the deceased moon gods that were making the sounds. This was the description of the Moon God Ruins on the map Ling Chen had bought from Qian Gun Gun. The ground he was walking on was not stable or flat, making it difficult for Ling Chen to keep his balance. Before he could register his surroundings, a disgusting rotting odor blew into him, making him feel like throwing up. Luckily, he held his breath in time, and resisted the urge to throw up. Moon God Ruins, it was indeed a place that had been completely and utterly ruined. Although the area was quite spacious, it was unnaturally dark. Looking up, a thick layer of dark clouds covered the sky, creating an oppressive atmosphere. The ground was covered with clusters of gray and black vegetation, making it difficult to find even a single patch of uncovered, flat ground. After a long time, Ling Chen finally began to become accustomed to the smell of this place, and his breathing became normal again. Although almost 10,000 years had passed, the aftermath of the intense battle still remained. The various ruins caused one to shudder imagining how fearsome the battle had been, as well as how incredibly powerful the Shura and the moon gods and goddesses had been. Moreover, from the map, it seemed that the Moon God Ruins covered an area of hundreds of kilometers. Indeed, hundreds of kilometers. It was not from a natural disaster, but rather one Shura and the 4 other strongest beings in the mystic moon world of that time. It was evident how overwhelmingly powerful the power of a saint-destroyer was. Xiao Hui. Ling Chen called out Xiao Hui, and began to walk through the Moon God Ruins. The feeling of walking on the ground in the ruins was extremely unpleasant, but compared to the smell, it was almost negligible. Ling Chen continued to walk forwards with Xiao Hui. After walking for 10 or so minutes, all he could see was still only ruins, but now there were occasionally some bones scattered on the ground. These bones most likely belonged to the unfortunate creatures that had been caught in the crossfire of the battle. With such a large radius of destruction, the number of innocent beings that had died was simply immeasurable. The bones that had remained were extremely fragile, simply touching them would cause them to disintegrate into dust. After all, it was extremely hot and humid here, completely different to the forest of bones' chilling atmosphere. Mixed with the rotting stench in the humid wind, great particles of sand were continuously blown into Ling Chen's face as he continued to walk in this overcast expanse. Ling Chen stopped walking, and looked behind him. No matter how hard he looked, he couldn't see any difference between the landscape behind him and the landscape in front of him. No matter if it was humans or animals, one would find themselves hopelessly lost in such an environment. Ling Chen took out his map, and reconfirmed his position, then started frowning. What was going on? After entering for such a long time, he had not seen any monsters, nor had he heard of any mournful crying. Xiao Hui also had not shown behavior that was indicative of danger. So what was the objective of this quest? He was now supposedly to the south of the center of the ruins. After having a look at the map, he put it away, and said, "Xiao Hui, let's walk towards the north." With Xiao Hui leading the way, Ling Chen was not worried at all about getting lost. Xiao Hui's performance in the Forest of Bones had been simply phenomenal. Xiao Hui led the way with Ling Chen following behind, and they advanced towards the north, slowly heading towards the center of the ruins. No matter if he successfully completed the quest or not, he could only enter the ruins once. That meant that if Ling Chen left the map for any reason, it would count as him giving up on the quest, and would not be given a second chance. As such, since he started the quest, he would have to keep going until he completed it. After walking for another half an hour, something completely unexpected happened, resulting in Ling Chen suddenly stopping. Normally, the lunar scourge on Ling Chen's wrist would be disguised as a normal bracelet by Qi Yu's power. Only when he was using the lunar scourge's skills would it revert back to its normal appearance. However, the lunar scourge suddenly let out a faint black glow, then changed back to its true appearance. The Gemini Orb and Sagittarius Orb embedded in the 2nd and 9th slots respectively also released their lights. Ling Chen stood still, and raised his right hand, staring at the lunar scourge. At the same time, Qi Yu's voice sounded out in Ling Chen's mind, "Little Master, where are we?" Qi Yu, surprised, yet lazy voice made her sound like she had just woken up from a pleasant dream. Ling Chen immediately answered, "This is the Moon God ruins. What's going on with the lunar scourge? Why is it suddenly glowing?" Moon God ruins, the place where the Shura had fallen, Qi Yu muttered to herself. Out of the 4 quests, the last one was located at the Moon God ruins, so she was not too surprised. It's probably because the lunar scourge detected something. Detected something? Could it be another God Orb or Saint Orb? Surprisingly, Qi Yu rejected this idea, probably not. Sometimes when the lunar scourge is close to God Orbs or Saint Orbs, it will not react at all. Even if it did react, only the corresponding socket for the orb close by would light up. To be honest, I don't know what the lunar scourge has detected either. Perhaps if you keep walking you'll find an answer. Qi Yu was also curious as to why the lunar scourge was acting in such a way. As such, Ling Chen did not bother continuing asking any question, and continued to walk forwards with Xiao Hui leading the way. As he walked, he would occasionally look at the lunar scourge. He wasn't sure if he was imagining things, but every time he advanced a certain distance, it seemed that the lunar scourge would glow a little brighter. Ling Chen had been sent to the Moon God ruins by the system. As for how he would be sent out, that was not his main concern at the moment. The ruins in front of him seemed to stretch out forever, and without knowing it, Ling Chen found that he had already been walking for 2 hours. Since he had entered the Moon God ruins, he had not encountered a single monster, nor any other type of danger. In front of him were just dark and gloomy ruins. Taking out his map, he found that he was very, very close to the center of the ruins, and the black glow on the lunar scourge became extremely intense. It seemed that he had not been imagining things before. The closer he walked towards the center, the more intense the light from the lunar scourge became. It was evident that he was getting closer and closer to the thing that the lunar scourge had detected. "Why, is there demonic aura here?" Qi Yu's voice once again rang out in Ling Chen's mind. The hot and humid air suddenly became cold, as the weeping wind howled into Ling Chen's face. Xiao Hui stopped moving and stayed by his side, staring ahead at the endless ruins. Ling Chen also stopped and frowned as he looked on. The lunar scourge on his right hand was releasing an unusual dark glow. This weeping, was it the cry described in the task? The eerie sounds in the icy darkness made it seem as though a female ghost was crying, unsettling Ling Chen. He concluded that this wasn't just a sound made by the wind, but indeed a woman's cry. There was someone, in the Moon God ruins. He didn't have to wait around for long. As less than 30 m in front of him, a fast-moving figure was slowly appearing. It looked like a standard female zombie, with long legs and a shawl of dark hair that shrouded her face. Her infected body was completely black, with long white drapes covering her body and legs. Extending from her back were 2 black wings, one spread open, and the other broken in half. The wind was becoming increasingly cold, and the weeping sound was getting closer and closer, now as if it was right beside him. At this point, he knew that the source of the cry was coming from this female creature, but he could not decipher whether she was a ghost or a person. Moon God representative. Chi-Yu exclaimed in bewilderment. What? Did you say she's? The Moon God representative can all use their power to fashion a pair of white wings. Although her wings are broken and filthy, those are definitely the wings of a Moon God representative. You can tell from their shape. She must have been one of the Moon God representatives that were killed during hard-fought victory against Shura. It's possible that this is what's left of her spirit, that's why it continues to stay in the Moon God ruins. She was talking about the Moon God, but then suddenly said, wait, no. The Moon God representative's powers are always imbued with holy energy. Even if there was some spirit residue after death, it would be so holy that it would not turn into a ghost. Furthermore, the body of the Moon God representative before us seems to be emanating a purely demonic aura. Ling Chen was at a loss as to what Chi-Yu was saying, but he was in no mood to try and understand her right now. Before him was a weeping female ghost that was floating towards them. He could sense the danger rapidly approaching. Undead Moon God representative, type, demon, undead, level, 20, grade, subcelestial, HP, 99999. This was one of the Moon God representatives that died 10,000 years ago, in the most hard-fought victory against Shura. Its body was not completely destroyed and was protected by the Moon God, so it never rotted away. 100 years ago, an unknown demon energy was poured into the dead body, transforming it into an undead puppet. Passive abilities: 1. Dark attack resistance 50%, immune to instant death, dark, curse, confusion, sleep, berserk, and poison and all stat debuffs. 2. There is a demonic aura surrounding the body. All non-dark creatures within 20 m take 50 damage per second, light element creatures take 100 damage per second. 3. There are still remnants of the Moon God representative's power, physical damage resistance 35% active abilities, voice of damnation, lets out a terrible weeping, causing all non-undead creatures within 30 m to have a 100% chance to be cursed for 10 seconds. Physical attack, magic attack, HP, evasion, critical strike and pierce rate are reduced. EXP gain and SP gain are reduced to 50%, chance of critical hits and damage received increased by 50%, cast rate, once every 30 seconds. Demonic toxic gas, releases a poisonous mist in a 15 m radius around a target area. Does not deal damage, but puts any target into a 10-second, poisoned, and cursed state. When poisoned, you lose 10% HP per second. Cast rate, high. Undead Moon God representative / targets up to 3 targets within 3 m ahead of the Undead Moon God representative. 5% chance of poisoning, 5% chance of cursing, 5% chance of suppression. Cast rate, high. Undead Moon God representative dance, affects all targets within 30 m of the Undead Moon God representative, dealing great damage. Also has a 15% chance of instant death. Before casting, the body will be fly up and begin to dance, releasing the intense power of the Moon God. Extremely difficult to avoid. Cast rate, low. Sub-celestial grade, the grade between Lord and Celestial. The Undead Moon God representative before them could not compare to a real Moon God, but her passive and active abilities were still frighteningly strong. When Ling Chen saw the information about her, Chi-Yu had seen as well. What she suspected before was right, so she became even more cautious. If it really has demon powers, could it be a demon from a certain clan, or just some demon that was unexpectedly hiding here that used demonic manipulation to reanimate the Moon God's body to avoid being destroyed by her? Ling Chen didn't think as much as Chi-Yu. Summoning his weapons, he was already fully alert and ready for combat. As the Undead Moon God representative approached, red digital numbers appeared over his head. As long as he was within 20 m of her, he would lose HP like this. A HP loss at this rate was still acceptable, but it did limit his combat prowess. That is, he was unable to use soul sacrifice, which stopped him from ending this battle quickly. For a second, his eyes glimmered, and Ling Chen rushed forwards, closing in 10 m towards her. The undead moon god representative flicked her hair back, revealing a pale white face and letting out a shrill cry. Ling Chen's ears went numb for a while, and his body stopped moving. Ding, you have been affected by curse, magic attack, evasion, critical strike and pierce rate. EXP gain, SP gain are all decreased by 50%. Rate of taking a critical hit and taken damage increased by 50%, physical attack and hit rate unaffected. Ling Chen's occupation was war god, so he was unaffected by physical attack debuffs, and with the Sagittarius orb on his body, any kind of hit rate reduction was also nullified. He was fortunate so, as the undead moon god representative already had a 35% resistance against physical attacks. A further 50% debuff would have greatly increased the difficulty of this battle. After using the voice of damnation, the undead moon god representative stopped, before she suddenly released a cloud demonic toxic gas, which flew towards Ling Chen. He took a step in the wrong direction, and so had to flip his entire body in order to narrowly avoid the surprise attack. Rushing forwards with 2 steps, he entered within the 5 m range of Ling Tian burst, and putting his hands together, he unleashed the attack. -410, -408. The undead moon god representative's defense was not ridiculous like the warring palace skeleton. She was a subcelestial super boss, but even if defense wasn't her specialty, she was still much stronger than a level 20 lord boss. With the 35% physical resistance, 2 hits from the Ling Tian burst didn't even do more than 1000 damage. The attack speed of the undead moon god representative was relatively quick as well. Even after taking an attack, she didn't move back in the slightest, but continued to float like the wind. When Ling Chen was within 3 m of recovering his soaring cloud, she fired the undead moon god representative /forwards. When the undead moon god representative was casting her slash, she raised her hand. This was an obvious warning to her attack, so even if he was close, he didn't need to be afraid. For when she raised her hand, Ling Chen would already know it was coming and could easily move out of the way. It would be easy to dodge the attacks and then quickly run past, hitting her with Ling Tian bursts on the way. 781780. However, the effects of the curse were not just for decoration. Of the 4 times Ling Chen attacked, he hadn't crit even once. Ling Chen didn't worry about this, as he had sufficient vision and the ground was effectively flat. So, in the absence of any interfering external factors, he could completely focus on relentlessly attacking his target without any thought. With the current conditions he was like a god. The demonic toxic gas, undead moon god representative / the undead moon god representative's weeping was always in the air, sometimes light, sometimes sharp. All kinds of attacks were launched at Ling Chen, but they all missed. Ling Chen was like a shadow, weaving past the undead moon god representative, who was unleashing a storm of attacks. The lunar scourge on his right hand was releasing a dark glow that would have been dazzling to anyone who was watching. 78377978611261, Pierce ignores physical defense, rather than pure damage reduction. The HP of the undead moon god representative was quickly decreasing, but her rapid attacks had not stopped. Other than the curse on Ling Chen, which wasn't making much of a difference, she had not landed a single attack. Ling Chen's body was as fast as the wind, as he darted around her body. The undead moon god representative's normal attack was limited to the area in front of it, which Ling Chen dealt with best. He continually changed directions, attacking and moving quickly, occasionally taking a potion to refill drained HP. Eventually, the undead moon god representative's HP was reduced to half. 78015562. She was finally angry, rotating her body as the power of the undead moon god representative began to take the form of grey swords, which she was ready to fire out around her. The range of the dance was a 30 m radius, and when she started dancing, Ling Chen retreated as quickly as possible. In such a short period of time, he couldn't escape the danger zone. The swords were starting to be fired out behind him. He quickly turned around, looking at the swords that were rushing towards him, and unexpectedly decided to face the onslaught. The swords flew close by Ling Chen's ears, body, and hair. He moved an uncountable number of times in a second, and emerged unscathed after all the swords were finally behind him. 2 Ling Tian slashes were cast on the undead moon goddess, who was still in the middle of her spell. -780, -1562. Who? A grey wind blew past Ling Chen, obviously aware of his position. This was one of the undead moon god representative's abilities, demonic toxic gas. Are there more undead moon god representatives? Careful. The danger had not been averted. Qiyu let out a cry of caution as another demonic toxic gas cloud flew from the right, hitting exactly where Ling Chen had just stopped moving. This time there was no way he could avoid it. It hit him squarely in the front, and a mass of grey gas expanded from the surface of his body. Ding, you have been poisoned. You will lose 10% HP per second for 10 seconds. 5050500105. At the moment he was hit by the demonic toxic gas, he clearly understood his situation. Other than the current moon god representative whom he had put to half HP, there were another 2 with the exact same appearance. They even had the same undead properties, the same long, covering hair and filthy, broken wings that fluttered behind them. On the map, stronger bosses were less likely to appear. In the area surrounding Azure Dragon City, encountering a high-level boss was incredibly rare, and only a handful of players throughout all of China had seen a celestial boss. However, in these moon god ruins, 3 sub-celestial bosses had appeared all at once. These 3 undead moon god representatives surrounded Ling Chen, who stood in the middle of their formation. Despite his poisoning, he did not panic, but seeing the damage values above his head made him furrow his brow. In 1 second, 4 damage values would appear, making him lose 255 HP per second. At this rate of HP loss, he would be dead within a minute. This was due to the poison, stacking with the passive abilities of the 3 undead moon god representative, which would each cause him to lose 50 HP per second, totaling to a loss of 150 HP per second. If a player with low HP was standing here, there would be no need to even attack. They would run out of HP before they even got close. Facing 1 undead moon god representative had already been tough, let alone 3. Now finally understanding his own situation, Ling Chen didn't hesitate any longer. Glancing around, he noticed a gap through which he could escape, and quickly rushed towards it. Right now, he needed to stop his offensive strategy and leave the vicinity of the 3 undead moon god representatives, otherwise, the damage over time would kill him. Ling Chen's burst of speed could not be matched by anyone. The 3 undead moon god representatives were about to coordinate their multidirectional attack, but for a moment there was a blur in their vision. Suddenly, they had lost their target. 2 seconds had yet to pass, and Ling Chen had already reached the edge of the range of the 3. He then took out a yellow potion to regain some of the HP that he had lost, then summoned the cloud-stepping mare and climbed on, rushing north as his HP continued to drop. Instructing the cloud-stepping mare to further increase its movement speed, Ling Chen easily escaped the 20m range of the 3 undead moon god representatives. All life-draining effects disappeared except for the one from the demonic toxic gas, but in the end he barely survived with 26 HP. As the cooldown for the yellow potion just reset, he hurriedly gulped it down, gaining back some more of the lost HP. The mare continued to push ahead, leaving the 3 undead moon god representatives further and further behind. The moon god ruins were not particularly suitable for a mare to run on, because the ground was uneven and could easily cause it to trip. This was also the reason why Ling Chen had been walking up until now. Before this incident, if he had been riding the cloud-stepping mare up till now, he would have been able to easily escape the 3 undead moon god representatives' area of effect. Even though it had taken so much effort just to take one down to half HP, he would still happily face it. Defeating a boss of this level, not to mention 3 of them, would yield a significant reward. The poison had dissipated, but Ling Chen had not slowed down, widening the gap between him and the 3 undead moon god representatives. Over this time he had slowly restored his HP back to full, and while sitting on the cloud stepping mare he looked back towards the 3. Although they were chasing him together, they weren't aligned side by side. The one which he had taken down to half health was standing at the front, while the others followed in a row behind. Their attributes were completely different, but their movement speed was exactly the same, allowing them to maintain their formation as they were chasing him. The distance between him and the 3 grew until it finally became greater than the farthest undead moon god representative's aggro range. She stopped chasing him and began to aimlessly wander about. Ling Chen eyes narrowed, memorizing this distance, and after a few seconds, the second undead moon god representative also halted. Now there was only one that was still in pursuit, the one that appeared first. Now, he slowed down, allowing the undead moon god representative to get nearer and nearer. When he was close to the 30 distance, he suddenly jumped off the cloud stepping mare, and retuned it, then rushed towards the undead moon god representative. 780782779. 7853880. He could ignore her voice of damnation, but other than that, there were only 3 attacks she could use. The quickest attack she could cast was the demonic toxic gas. When he was close she would use Undead Moon God Representative Slash, and for a long-range attack she would use Undead Moon God Representative Dance. Before casting any of these attacks there was an obvious indicator which Ling Chen was already familiar with. While facing 3 of them would be impossible, facing one would be relatively stress-free. -780, -782, -779. The damage values were like snowflakes dancing above the undead moon god representative's head. Although she was fairly resistant towards physical damage, Ling Chen's base damage was not low. One cast also hit twice, and even if she had 10,000 HP, she would not last long. Her HP was depleting quickly, from half to 1/3 and quickly to 1/4. The 2 other undead moon god representatives were far away wandering around carefree, completely oblivious to what was happening. -785, -3880. A magnificent purple critical hit damage value appeared, emptying the last bit of her HP, hitting her with a final Ling Tion slash. She was launched back onto the cold floor of the ruins where she lay motionless. From the body, emerged a dark gas that quickly dissipated in the air. By the body, a set of white, faintly glowing clothes appeared, greatly contrasting her dirty body and the grey ground. Ding! You have successfully defeated a level 20 sub-celestial boss, Undead Moon God Representative, SP increased +800, Fame +800. The article of clothing was exceptionally luxurious and good-looking, it even felt amazingly silky, like a young girl's skin. This piece of clothing was hard to rank amongst the 7 occupations. It was not unlike something a fairy would wear, clean and pure, floating through the clouds. Moon Goddess Light Dress, Type, Cosmetic Whole Body Garment, Upper Body plus Lower Body. Equip Requirements, a Pure Heart. A beautiful outer garment that the Moon God clan wears. It has been blessed by the Goddess of Order and seems to have a mysterious protective power. Occasionally, this would be graciously given to someone on the continent, someone whose heart was pure and innocent. Effect: when worn, immune to all debuffs. After reading its properties, Ling Chen was deeply surprised. These turned out to be the clothes that moon gods wore. This was not some conventional armor, but a cosmetic one that was worn over normal equipment. Cosmetic equips were generally for the beauty of female players, as once worn, they could completely cover any ugly heavy armor while not affecting its properties. Cosmetic equips could be customized at the tailor to their personal specifications and could also be made there. They do not affect your attributes at all though, they were for the sake of beauty. However, there were some legends in the world that speak of cosmetic equips with an additional effect, but other than Ling Chen, no one had ever seen one of these before. But now, here it was right before him in his hands. This moon god's dress did not only add any old effect, what it added was an immunity to all debuffs. There was only one condition: it required someone to be of pure heart. Although the undead moon god representative had only dropped this item, it was something that he was greatly pleased with. The cosmetic equip's effect was so powerful that it made it priceless. Ling Chen had also decided who its first owner would be. Naturally, he chose Ruo. He looked around, seeing the other two undead moon god representatives in the distance. Ling Chen became visibly eager. They could drop something like the moon goddess light dress. The lunar scourge had been constantly releasing a dark glow, and in its current state, looked like an all-consuming abyss that grew bigger and deeper. It was getting closer to something, but what exactly? After examining the lunar scourge, Ling Chen focused his attention and rushed towards the second undead moon god representative, entering her aggro range. Alerted, the undead moon god representative began to move towards him, which prompted Ling Chen to back up and lead her far away in order to evade her attacks and retaliate with both weapons. And in 20 minutes, the body of the undead moon god representative laid in front of Ling Chen. Ding! You have successfully defeated a level 20 sub-celestial boss. Undead moon god representative, SP increased plus 800, fame plus 800. With his abilities and equipment, taking down a single lord boss was no problem. Taking down a super boss between the lord and celestial grades was also relatively easy for him. When his abilities and equipment have been upgraded, Ling Chen's strength would have been on par with a celestial boss. The undead moon god representative dropped an item upon its death, but its moon god light dress wasn't the item that Ling Chen was looking for, but rather a small shiny item. He stepped forward to pick it up, holding it in his palm. Bearing the resemblance of an exquisite hairpin covered in pearls, it emanated a small warm radiance into his hand. Moon God Hairpin, one of the many beautiful hairpins symbolic of the moon gods, and worn by every moon god representative. Moon god representatives face severe punishments upon losing the hairpin, and thus do everything in their power to ensure that it is not lost to any other being. Within it contains a little amount of moon god power, which allows the wearer to bypass the forbidden area around the moon god palace. The item description came as a surprise to Ling Chen. Like the moon god light dress, the hairpin belonged to the moon gods. But the light dress could be given to another with a pure heart, whereas the hairpin could not be passed on. The moon god clan would definitely punish anyone who was found to be in possession of a hairpin. What was more interesting, however, was its ability to allow the wearer to bypass the forbidden area which led to the moon god palace. It was imperative that this kind of item must not fall into the hands of other beings. Should a human from the Forgotten Continent somehow acquire such an item, he probably would have taken it to be a holy item of worship. There was no way he would take it to the Moon Palace, even if he did have 100 times more courage than he had already. The Moon Palace was a holy land that held Mystic Moon's strongest clan, the most revered in all of Mystic Moon. It was not a place that could be accessed by ordinary people. And even with the moon god hairpin, an ordinary person would barely have enough strength to get near the palace. There wasn't a difference between entering and suicide, and moon gods were all true gods or demigods. Anyone who possessed the moon god hairpin only needed common sense to realize that it is a potential time bomb, and should be immediately returned to the body of the moon god representative. But Ling Chen kept it anyway, putting it in his bag. He then turned around, and rushed to attack the last moon god representative. Aren't you worried that you might get discovered by the moon god clan? Chi Yu asked. Of course I'm worried, replied Ling Chen, but throwing it away will be show that I'm afraid of them. Now that I have it, it's better to keep it on me. Who knows, maybe I'll use it one day. Chi Yu laughed. As time passes, young master, I find myself taking a liking to your personality more and more. But the young master need not worry about carrying the hairpin. Your great storage space would make it hard for it to be detected, even by a moon god. The incredible softness of her voice was so relaxing it caused Ling Chen to almost get hit by one of the representatives' attacks. After taking care of the previous two representatives, the third one was a piece of cake. Altogether, they awarded Ling Chen 2400 SP and the peacefulness in the surrounding area was restored. Even though the weeping disappeared with the triumph of slaying the three moon god representatives, Ling Chen had still not completed the quest to investigate the source of the weeping. Although a sub-celestial boss dropping an item was lucky enough, Ling Chen felt slightly down at the lack of any items dropped by the third undead moon god representative. He turned his attention back to the lunar scourge. It was still reacting, but to what? Just as he was going to continue moving ahead, he turned around and caught sight of a dull metallic luster. The luster was not weak enough to be an illusion or a reflection, and upon further searching, Ling Chen found a cold key near the body of a moon god representative. The key was of a dark color and rusted. After falling onto the ground it easily blended into the color of the ruins. Old key, the old key is very old. It contains the power of the Moon God clan and is unable to be destroyed by the forces of nature, preserving its state even now. It may be used to unlock the Water Celestial Pavilion at the 7th shrine within the Moon God Palace. Could it be that the Moon God representative that lived in the 7th shrine's Water Celestial Pavilion was the Water Celestial God representative? The Moon God light dress, the Moon God hairpin, the old key, these items were originally held by Moon God representatives. Every Moon God representative could be a god of the humans, and their power, self-evident, could sustain them even 10,000 years after death. Obtaining their items were an extremely difficult task and yet, Ling Chen was able to acquire 3 of them. Wasting no more time thinking about it, Ling Chen continued to push ahead, looking forward to battling more undead moon god representatives so that he could gain a large amount of SP and valuable items. In his half-hour trek, Ling Chen didn't encounter a single moving creature. He took out his map and discovered that he was already close to the exact center of the area. The dark glow coming from the lunar scourge was reaching an extreme point of darkness, covering half of Ling Chen's right hand with a pitch-black color. "Do you know what it's reacting to now?" he asked. "Nope," Chiyu answered. "This is my first time seeing the lunar scourge reacting in such an aggressive manner. The lunar scourge has a sense of familiarity, so perhaps that's what it's reacting to." What's more, there was a slight hesitation before she continued, "The lunar scourge seems to be calling something." Ling Chen was taken by surprise. "Calling what?" The sound of weeping rang aloud, and Ling Chen immediately looked up. A gray silhouette aimlessly floated about within his line of sight, another undead moon god representative. Ling Chen readied his weapons, took a deep breath, and rushed towards it. The wandering representative suddenly stopped in its tracks and rushed towards him, letting out a long, shrilling cry. Ling Chen suddenly slowed down. He was outside the normal aggro range, but how did this particular representative notice him from an even further distance? His eyes widened, and a chilly wind blew past him. In a mere few moments, the undead moon god representative had closed the distance between them by half. Her dark hair and stained white dress, she looked like the previous 3 undead moon god representatives except for one small detail, the wings on her back. They were not broken, but instead still seemed to be perfectly fine. The color of her wings were also pitch black in comparison to the wings of the other representatives, which were only a dark shade. Dark Undead Moon God Representative, Type, Dark, Undead, Level, 30, Grade, Celestial. More information cannot be detected. Passive abilities and active abilities cannot be detected. Ling Chen definitely could not sustain this sort of HP loss. This meant that against this dark undead moon god representative, he had no chance of winning. Without a second thought, Ling Chen turned around and ran. However, the dark undead moon god pursued him like a howling gale, and despite Ling Chen running at his full speed, the distance between them shrank to 5 meters. Suddenly, a sense of danger rushed at him from behind, causing him to instinctively jump up. A few rays of black light streaked through the area where Ling Chen's body had just been. This was the Dark Undead Moon God representative's Undead Moon God /. However, no matter if it was attack speed or the range, they were both at least double that of the other Moon God representatives from before. LV-30 Celestial bosses were simply incomparable to LV-20 Celestial bosses. After jumping up, Ling Chen hit the ground rolling and called out the cloud-stepping mare simultaneously. Before he even regained his footing, he once again jumped up, and sat onto the cloud-stepping mare's back, and sped away. 200-200. Even with a large increase to his movement speed, he could tell that he had not left the Undead Moon God representative behind. The damage figures did not stop appearing over his head, so he hurriedly drank a yellow potion, recovering his HP. However, with such a rate of HP loss, even if he used the yellow potions at the right time every time, he would only be able to last for 20 or so seconds. He turned around and looked at the Dark Undead Moon God representative, and found that even with the cloud-stepping mare, their movement speeds were about equal. Thus, even if she couldn't catch up to him, he would still lose HP from her demonic aura. At this moment, he saw the Dark Undead Moon God representative's abdomen slightly contract. This was one of the Undead Moon God representative's skills' demonic toxic gas setup action. Crap. The biggest disadvantage for riding a mount was that although one's movement speed increased, one would not be as agile. After all, one could never control a mount as well as they controlled their own body. Although the demonic toxic gas didn't have any on-hit damage, it would apply the poison status to him. With the HP loss of 200 HP per second, then adding on a poison status, he would definitely die in seconds. Moreover, the poison was bound to be also a lot stronger than those of the Undead Moon God representatives from before. The demonic toxic gas was the fastest attack skill that the Undead Moon God representatives had. Ling Chen didn't even have time to think as he used both hands to propel himself off the cloud-stepping mare's back, and as he was falling, used his feet to kick off from the cloud-stepping mare's sides. Whoosh! By kicking away from the cloud-stepping mare, Ling Chen was able to fall quite a distance away. Moments later, the cloud-stepping mare was hit by the demonic toxic gas and died immediately. Ding, your mount, cloud-stepping mare, has died. It turned out that this Dark Undead Moon God representative's demonic toxic gas even applied on-hit damage, instantly killing the cloud-stepping mare. Ling Chen, who was still on the ground, didn't even have time to mourn the loss of his 20,000 gold coins as he flipped his body up and quickly raised his right hand. Moon Shadow. An incredibly dark light burst out from the lunar scourge, covering the Dark Undead Moon God representative and fixing it in place. While the Undead Moon God representative had been frozen, Ling Chen quickly glanced at his HP, then ran as fast as he could. He hoped that he would be able to get out of its aggro range before the 5 seconds ended. However, her aggro range was 70 meters. It was almost impossible to run that far in just 5 seconds. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Ling Chen finally ran out of the AoE of the demonic aura, and his HP did not continue to drop anymore. This caused him to give a small sigh of relief. Immediately, he drank another yellow potion, causing his almost depleted HP bar to recover. However, after 2 seconds, the moon shadow's effects would disappear, and he simply couldn't think of a way to get rid of the Dark Undead Moon God representative in the remaining time. Awo, awo. While thinking, sounds of howling came from his side. This sound greatly surprised Ling Chen, and he almost walked into Xiao Hui, who had suddenly stopped. Of course, this sound had come from Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui, what's wrong? Ling Chen also stopped walking. Just as he asked Xiao Hui, his eyes widened. Awo. Awo. Xiao Hui's 4 limbs were extremely straight and tensed up, and his claws dug deeply into the ground. His whole body arched up, and his gray fur was standing up completely, looking like strands of needles. He furiously gnashed together his teeth, and his eyes had a vicious look in them as he continued to howl. Ling Chen realized, Xiao Hui's behavior indicated that a terrifying danger was coming nearer, was already near. Moon Shadow's effects disappeared, and the dark undead moon god representative began to charge at him again. Ling Chen turned around, but did not take any action. This was because a dark light shot down from the sky, and landed squarely onto the dark undead moon god representative's body. Bang! The dark light exploded on the dark undead moon god representative's body, and then disappeared as a black fog. After the black fog disappeared, the dark undead moon god representative stopped moving, as if it was a puppet that had stopped. A dark and cruel laughter that sounded like it came from hell boomed down from above. Hee-hee-ha. Hee-hey, the sky suddenly darkened, and the wind stopped blowing. Apart from the hellish laughter, everything in the area was silent and still. Only the lunar scourge on Ling Chen's right hand shone with a piercing dark light. An aura so terrifying that it felt as if it was cutting through his bones descended from the sky like a mountain. Cold sweat burst forth across Ling Chen's whole body. This is... Ling Chen's teeth started to involuntarily chatter, and his body began to sway like a blade of grass in the wind. Under such overwhelming pressure, this was his body's natural reaction. Ling Chen slowly raised his head, and looked up at the sky. In the sky, a dark cloud was slowly moving, and released a demonic laughter. This sort of pressure, this sort of aura, this trembling, this scenery, it all seemed so familiar. It reminded Ling Chen of that time in Lonely Spirit Ridge when the war demon beast had appeared. No, it was even more terrifying than that time. Could it? Could it be? I knew it. I thought of it as a possibility, but I never thought they would have the guts to come to this place. This place's demonic aura, as well as the demonic energy controlling those undead moon god representatives, all came from it. One of the 10 ancient demon beasts, with the strongest control over darkness, the shadow demon beast. Ling Chen. Before Qiyu had called out, Ling Chen had already guessed this. This sort of terrifying feeling and aura was indeed that of one of the 10 ancient demon beasts. So it was hiding here. A mysterious god-level demon beast. Hee-hey, ha-ha-ha. What do I see here, ha-ha-ha, TLN, again, the I is written as my royal demon self. The shadow demon beast's laughter was incredibly excited and arrogant, as if it had seen something it had desired for a long time. That light just then was the moon shadow only the lunar scourge has. That's right, it's the lunar scourge. It's the lunar scourge that my demon clan has searched for unceasingly, ha ha ha, ha ha ha. This voice caused Ling Chen's heart to sink even further. It's over. It wasn't just Ling Chen's heart that sunk, but also Qiyu's. This was because the scenario that they were dreading the most, only 10 or so days after the lunar scourge had come into Ling Chen's possession, was occurring right before their eyes. Before, in order to escape from the dark undead moon god representative, Ling Chen was forced to use Moon Shadow. At that time, this shadow demon beast must have been secretly observing Ling Chen. As one of the 10 ancient demon beasts, how would it not recognize that item that everyone knew about back then, and how would it not know about its unique light and unique skills? The lunar scourge had been exposed. Ling Chen was very clear about the consequences of the lunar scourge being exposed. The shadow demon beast's excited and arrogant laughter already told him the answer. Knowing that he possessed the lunar scourge, the shadow demon beast would risk everything to take it away from him. This meant that as long as he didn't hand over the lunar scourge, he would forever be pursued by the shadow demon beast, all of the demon beasts. The shadow demon beast was sure to tell all the other demon beasts about this information. What was even more terrifying was that if the Moon God clan found out about it too, he would no longer be able to exist in this mystic moon world. Thinking to hear, Ling Chen, who had maintained his calm in the face of this overwhelming danger, felt droplets of cold sweat roll down his forehead. I have already activated the spiritual mark Tao Tai left on you, TLN, see chapter 47 if you don't remember. This way, it should be able to sense that you are in danger. However, this entire area is controlled by the Shadow Demon Beast. The signal might not be able to be transferred out to Tao Tai, plus, even if he does receive the signal, because of all the demonic energy here, it would be hard for him to find us quickly, but this is the only option we have. Otherwise, we're completely finished. Back then, when Tao Tai had entrusted them with Xiao Hui, it had left a spiritual mark on him. If Ling Chen was ever in danger, if he activated the spiritual mark, Tao Tai would be able to sense it and come to his aid. Indeed, this was his last hope. Will Tao Tai be able to defeat the Shadow Demon Beast? Since they're both mysterious god grade, it'll be hard for one to defeat the other. Although Tao Tai is able to defeat the Shadow Demon Beast, it definitely won't be able to destroy it. As long as the Shadow Demon Beast isn't destroyed, it will definitely tell the other demon beasts about the Lunar Scourge. The Lunar Scourge is something that the demon beasts have dreamed of obtaining for millennia. They strongly believe that if they can obtain the Lunar Scourge, they can revive their demon emperor, once again returning to power. This time, we've really met some bad luck. Chi Yu's voice held a solemnness that Ling Chen had never heard before. The one who should be panicking the most about the Lunar Scourge being exposed should be her. Before all the God and Saint orbs were found, this was the situation she least wanted to encounter. What they were facing right now was equivalent to a terrifying nightmare for her. Try to stall for as much time as possible before Tao Tai gets here. I already told it that the Lunar Scourge has been discovered by the Shadow Demon Beast, so it should be here soon. Chi Yu sighed. Even if Tao Tai could immediately arrive, it still wouldn't be able to go back in time to prevent the Shadow Demon Beast finding out about the Lunar Scourge. Stalling for time, perhaps, that was the last sliver of hope. Ling Chen slowly raised his head, and looked at the dark cloud in the sky, and spluttered out 3 words, Shadow Demon Beast. Hee hee ha. The frightening laughter paused for a second, then became even wilder, ha 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 ha. I never thought after hiding away for 10,000 years, you tiny little human would be able to call out my royal name. Turns out my name hasn't been entirely forgotten, ha ha ha, that's right, I'm one of the 10 ancient demon beasts that serve the demon emperor. Being able to see me is the greatest glory in your entire life, ha 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 ha. Then, who are you? Ling Chen, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't want to say. I have no interest towards you. I'm just very glad that I didn't destroy you as soon as you entered. Otherwise, I would have missed out on a very big opportunity. Human, since you know my glorious name, you should know that trying to retaliate or run away is completely pointless. I've already said that I have no interest towards you, and I can't even be bothered attacking you. That's the only reason you're still alive. Now, be good and give me the Lunar Scourge. This way, I can spare you from dying and will send you safely out of here. Do you understand? The pressure from the Shadow Demon Beast made it harder and harder for Ling Chen to breathe, and there was not a single inch of his body that was not covered in cold sweat. Indeed, what the Shadow Demon Beast was after was the Lunar Scourge. However, it was impossible for him to give the Shadow Demon Beast the Lunar Scourge. After all, it was as if it was part of his body, even he had no way of taking it off, and even if he was killed, there was no way for it to drop from his body. However, there were a few things that the Shadow Demon Beast had said that were absolutely true. These were that it only wanted the Lunar Scourge, and was not interested towards Ling Chen at all. In order to obtain the Lunar Scourge, it probably wouldn't immediately kill Ling Chen. Even the dark undead moon god representative from before had been stopped by it. This was because the Shadow Demon Beast believed that the drop rate for the Lunar Scourge dropping from Ling Chen was probably very small, and they would probably have to kill him more than 10 times, which was much more troublesome than getting him to hand it over himself. Moreover, in order to repeatedly kill him, it would have to go into human territory, which would arouse the attention of the Moon God clan. Ling Chen was sure that at least for now, he was safe. However, this didn't mean he could relax, considering the consequences of the lunar scourge being exposed. What should he do? Seeing no reaction from Ling Chen, the shadow demon beast's voice became colder. What, didn't you understand what I was saying? Immediately give me the lunar scourge. That way, I'll spare you from dying. Otherwise, I'll let you experience the most painful death, and then turn you into a puppet, so that you won't even be able to rest in peace. The demon beasts all had vicious and cruel personalities, and did not have much patience either. The shadow demon beast began to fiercely threaten Ling Chen. Ling Chen exhaled, and slowly said, "Shadow demon beast, although I truly want to give you the lunar scourge in exchange for my life, this isn't possible. Haven't you heard that once the lunar scourge chooses a master, it would bond onto the master's body, and cannot be taken off?" Ling Chen raised his right hand, which had the lunar scourge tightly attached to it. "Even I don't have a way to take it off." Whoosh! In the deathly silence, a gust of cold wind started to blow, causing the dark cloud to move. Within the cold wind, a dark ray of light shot down and landed in front of Ling Chen, then condensed into a swirling dark fog. That's the shadow demon beast. The shadow demon beast doesn't have a fixed shape, it uses darkness energy to freely change its body's shape. This dark fog is the shadow demon beast. Chi Yu quickly explained. The moment the shadow demon beast in front of Ling Chen, a system announcement sounded out in his ears. "Ding, you have investigated the origin of the mournful weeping. Having completed the core part of the Moon God Ruins quest, you can now return to Azure Dragon City and report to the Azure Dragon's mayor, after which you will have completed the Moon God Ruins quest." Ling Chen felt veins beginning to bulge out of his forehead. So the core part of the Moon God Ruins quest was to find the shadow demon beast. This was simply too outrageous. With the strength of players at the current stage of the game, no matter how many came, they would all die. Wasn't this just a death trap? No wonder the quest warning had things like, "All who enter shall die. If you would like to die, please accept this quest." So those weren't to just scare players, but rather the freaking truth. However, regardless, being able to complete the quest was a great comfort. The swirling dark fog filled with the scent of death slowly drew near to him. The terrifying voice came out of the fog, "Hey, tiny human, you reminded me of something. You're right, once the lunar scourge has chosen a master, no one is able to take it off from the master, unless the master is dead." Ling Chen frowned, and his right hand clenched, his gaze turning cold. "So, go die." As the shadow demon beast ferociously howled, the dark fog that was about 10 meters away from Ling Chen began to expand, and a deathly aura began to surge towards Ling Chen from all around him. At this moment, Ling Chen stretched out his right hand, and a black light erupted from the lunar scourge. Moon. Shadow. Although the darkness energy released by the shadow demon beast was incredibly pure and powerful, it could never compare to that of the lunar scourge. Under the moon shadow, even the shadow demon beast was frozen in place, unable to make even a sound. In the 5 seconds, Ling Chen gritted his teeth and furiously ran towards the north. In this world, there were still some things that Moon Shadow was not able to freeze in place. One of these things was Creature's aura. Although the shadow demon beast had been fixed in place, Ling Chen was still affected by its aura, and thus was still in its aggro range. In this sort of condition, Ling Chen was not able to use a teleport scroll. As for escaping the shadow demon beast's detection in merely 5 seconds, that was simply impossible. "Chi Yu, do you have any other ideas?" While running, Ling Chen loudly shouted. Chi Yu despondently sighed, "Right now, Little Master has no chance against the shadow demon beast. Any method would not be able to make up for the difference in your power." The 5 seconds passed very quickly, and after the shadow demon beast became unfrozen, it furiously shouted, "You actually want to resist against me? I'll let you experience the most painful torture before you die. Once again, death was right behind him. If the shadow demon beast wanted to kill him, even if he was 1,000 meters away, it still would be incredibly easy for it to kill him. Ling Chen clenched his fists and gritted his teeth and looked back. His eyes widened, saw the dark fog expand to 10 or so meters in height. Poof! Underneath his feet, he was suddenly tripped by something hard. Ling Chen, who was running at his full speed, did not have time to react, and fell to the ground. He quickly flipped his body over, and found that the gigantic swirling dark fog was already less than 10 meters away from him. He actually thought he could escape from the shadow demon beast. He was too naive. Ling Chen self-mockingly laughed. He took out the soaring cloud spear and zephyr blade and gripped them in his hands. It was impossible for him to defeat the shadow demon beast, so he might as well at least hit it before he died. Tiny human, you actually wanted to try to escape from me, what a joke. Since I can obtain the lunar scourge after killing you, die. The gigantic dark fog rolled towards Ling Chen like a massive wave. Ling Chen raised his hands, and stared at the giant wave rolling towards him. Since he was going to die, he might as well go down with a decent fight. However, just as he raised his hands, his eyes flickered, the light from the lunar scourge, which had been shining intensely this entire time, suddenly subsided and completely disappeared. At the same time, the sky suddenly darkened, and in just a moment, all light had been swallowed by the darkness. Ling Chen could not see a single thing in front of him. Ling Chen, what's going on? What just happened? As the darkness descended, Ling Chen found that his breathing had stopped, and even his heart felt like it had stopped beating. The shadow demon beast's attack hadn't landed on him, and Ling Chen felt that he was still alive. However, it seemed as if time had stopped for him. Though he still could not breathe, his heart started beating again. He could clearly hear his heart thumping so loudly and violently that he was afraid that it might even burst. Pressure, a sort of pressure that Ling Chen could not use words to describe, covered the entire sky and land, completely overpowering the shadow demon beast's own aura and pressure. This sort of pressure was stronger than the shadow demon beast's by 1,000, if not 10,000 times. Under this sort of pressure, Ling Chen felt that his body was being crushed. All light had been devoured, and the ground shook. Even space began to tremble, as if it was about to be torn. Who is it? Get out here. In the complete darkness, Ling Chen heard the shadow demon beast's voice. Its trembling voice was filled with fear, because in front of this overwhelming pressure, its own demonic aura was just like a grain of sand in the sea. This sort of power could destroy it in just a split second. Ling Chen believed this sort of power could destroy the sky, no, even space itself. Qiyu, what is going on? Ling Chen shouted in his mind. When he received Qiyu's reply, it almost sounded like a stranger's voice. This was before in her voice, there was an unprecedented trembling and shaking. In this world, there is only one person who can release this sort of pressure. Boom! A streak of purple lightning descended from the sky and crashed in front of Ling Chen. When the lightning disappeared, Ling Chen discovered that in front of him was a person. Although his stature was similar to Ling Chen's, at first glance, he seemed like an incredibly tall and imposing mountain. Shura. This word fell like lightning on Ling Chen's heart. Who has woken me? The heavy voice filled the entire sky and land, and every word fell like a giant stone on Ling Chen's spirit. He was the Shura, and this was his voice. Who had woken him? Lunar Scourge, so it was you. Lunar Scourge's name being said by the Shura caused Ling Chen's heart to shake. Was it the Lunar Scourge that woke up the Shura? Could it be that the brilliant black light from before was because it detected the Shura? However, didn't the Shura already die? He was said to have been vanquished by the 3 moon goddesses 10,000 years ago. So why was he able to appear before Ling Chen? I have already died, and you have become so weak. Since you have woken me, then, let me do for you one last thing." The Shura's voice was the heaviest voice Ling Chen ever heard in his entire life. Although it was only one voice, and was not that loud, yet it shook his heart as if millions of people were shouting at the same time. Every word he spoke would shake Ling Chen's entire body. As the Shura spoke his last word, the aura around them began to change. A gale started to blow, and the air that was originally still became turbulent. A cruel and oppressive aura began to spread, as the smell of fresh blood began to envelope everything as well. Another purple streak of lightning descended, and in the light that it gave off, Ling Chen saw the person standing in front of him looked as if he had just walked out of a pool of blood. He had blood-red hair, a blood-red face, blood-red eyes, was wearing blood-red armor, and his long sword was entirely dyed in red. All of those things were not naturally that color, they had all been dyed into that color by blood. One man had exterminated 10% of all living creatures in the Forgotten Continent. The amount of blood he had been stained by could not be imagined by anyone. After being bathed in blood numerous times, every part of his body had already become permanently blood-red. Shura. You are the Shura. If Chi Yu was able to recognize the Shura, there was no reason for the shadow demon beast not to. 10,000 years ago, they had both existed. Most living creatures now had already forgotten about the Shura after such a long time, but the shadow demon beast that had existed since 10,000 years ago definitely would not forget about the terrifying Shura. By the time it had finally realized whose aura this was, it was filled with dread and fear. The air was filled with the scent of fresh blood. Only the Shura's power would give off such a scent. The shadow demon beast, in all its terror, found that the Shura's killing intent was squarely directed at it. Be destroyed, and become the last corpse under my sword. What Ling Chen knew about the Shura was only a legend, whereas the shadow demon beast had personally witnessed how frightening the Shura was. Those who had been locked down by the Shura's pressure had never escaped alive before. The Shura had already clearly died, the shadow demon beast simply couldn't work out why he was able to appear here. Could this all be a big nightmare? However, it would never know the answer to all of its questions. When the Shura's voice had appeared in its ears, it had already begun to feel itself falling towards the abyss of death. Ah! It didn't beg for mercy, for the Shura was the most merciless creature in the entire world. Begging the Shura for mercy would be incredibly stupid. Instead, it let out a howl and sent a cluster of dark fog towards the Shura, while it furiously fled in the opposite direction. Boom! A third bolt of purple lightning streaked down from the sky. As the lightning lit up the area, Ling Chen saw the dark clouds covering the sky, as well as the Shura raising his right hand. Clang! A blood-red crescent of energy flew out from the Shura's sword, and passed through the cluster of dark fog that the shadow demon beast had sent out. The cluster of dark fog was wiped out like floodwaters washing over a little tongue of flame. In just a moment, the shadow demon beast's full-strength attack had been wiped out, and the blood-red crescent of energy continued forwards, and slammed into the escaping shadow demon beast. Arg! -9,980,000. The pitiful screaming could almost cause one's eardrums to burst, and Ling Chen clearly saw a gigantic damage figure float above the shadow demon beast. This was just a casual strike from the Shura. A casual strike had completely annihilated the shadow demon beast, and had caused millions of damage to a mysterious god-grade monster. Boom! A fourth bolt of lightning descended, and once again lit up the area. Ling Chen found that the Shura had disappeared from in front of him, and instead, there was a beautiful blood-red flower on top of where the shadow demon beast had been. Ah! A final, terrible scream caused the surrounding air to tremble. Shura's death domain, Chi Yu's voice sounded in Ling Chen's mind, the shadow demon beast has died. Only the echoes of the shadow demon beast's last cry remained, and even those gradually disappeared, resulting in silence once again. Ling Chen did not see clearly what the Shura had done, nor did he know how exactly he killed the shadow demon beast, but what he did know was that the shadow demon beast had been slain by the Shura. At the lonely Spirit Ridge, the war demon beast had been annihilated by Shi Ling's heavenly wrath of the 9 suns, at the cost of Shi Ling's own life. With how powerful the shadow demon beast was, apart from the rare Saint Destroyer creatures, what else could destroy it? Moreover, even Saint Destroyer creatures would find it difficult to quickly kill the shadow demon beast. However, against the Shura, it didn't even have the chance to retaliate before being completely destroyed. Was he really the Shura? So this was the power of a Shura? Ling Chen was incredibly in awe and shock of what had just happened. This was the greatest pressure he had ever experienced, as well as the most strength he had ever witnessed, and he wasn't even the target. The Shura had single-handedly wiped out 10% of all living creatures in the Forgotten Continent, and was being that was feared by all other beings. He was a being that even the 3 highest moon goddesses had to work together to defeat, the strongest being, Shura. After the shadow demon beast had died, the berserk energy and scent of fresh blood began to quickly disappear from the air. Slowly, the darkness also began to disperse, and Ling Chen found that he could gradually see again. The choking pressure from the Shura also quickly disappeared. The purple bolts of lightning also stopped falling from the sky. Did the Shura leave? When the Shura had appeared, all light had been swallowed. Now after the Shura stopped using his power, the light had come back. This sort of terrifying power even gave him control over natural things like light and darkness. It was indeed a legendary power that exceeded all comprehension. Despite hearing many stories about the Shura, Ling Chen finally truly began to understand why the Shura was so feared by all creatures. Chiyu, didn't the Shura die already? Ling Chen closed his eyes, trying to calm his heart down. The Shura indeed did die, but he was woken up by the lunar scourge. Chiyu replied. What do you mean? You'll see soon, this was all out of my expectations. I never thought, no one thought that not only was the lunar scourge not destroyed, but even the Shura still had a remnant of his soul existing. However, what's even better is that he killed the shadow demon beast. With the shadow demon beast dead, we don't have to worry about the lunar scourge being exposed anymore. Plus, with the lunar scourge on your body, the Shura won't harm you. Ling Chen went quiet for a bit, then asked, Chiyu, answer me honestly, was the lunar scourge's previous owner the Shura? Was the ancient item that caused him to enter the path of the Shura the lunar scourge? Yes. Chiyu replied. Ling Chen, in just a moment, countless thoughts passed through Ling Chen's mind. The legend of the Shura, as well as the things Tao Tai had told him that he had not completely understood, as well as the description of heaven's wrath, the way of the Shura, there is no return, determined to walk this path, heaven's wrath you will suffer, all suddenly began to make sense to Ling Chen. Lunar scourge. Shura. In the silence, Ling Chen opened his eyes. In front of him was the exact same scenery he had seen before. All traces of the Shura had disappeared, as if all that had just happened had all been just a dream. Ling Chen turned his head, and saw a person on his right. He was holding a long sword, his body covered in blood, he was standing still as a statue, looking at Ling Chen. The wind gently blew, but his hair and ripped clothes did not move at all. Shura. Ling Chen took a deep breath and walked towards him. Before today, Ling Chen never would have thought that he would meet this most feared man in the entire Forgotten Continent, much less speak with him. Ling Chen stood in front of the Shura, and the bloody scent on him almost made Ling Chen want to vomit. Despite the fact that he clearly knew that this man was the Shura who had supposedly died 10,000 years ago, he still asked, "Are you the Shura?" "No." Surprisingly, the man gave a negative answer. The Shura spoke with an expressionless face. Though he was speaking, his lips did not move at all. Shuras are arrogant and have cut off all emotional ties. Their reason for living is to kill and destroy. They would not speak with anyone, nor would they show mercy to anything. I used to be a Shura. However, right now, I am just the remnant of a soul woken up by the lunar scourge. However, I still have a little bit of the Shura's power. After a short while, I will forever disappear from this world. That's right. And the lunar scourge caused you to become a Shura? Yes. Ling Chen frowned, and raised his right hand. Then, doesn't that mean if I wear this lunar scourge, I'll become a Shura like you? The Shura's blood-red eyes turned to focus on Ling Chen's face, his voice serious. Yes, and no. Yes, and no? What do you mean? Ling Chen asked. The lunar scourge is the evilest item in the entire world, and possesses boundless power. Only with it can a being that represents utmost hatred, the Shura, be created. So it was indeed so. The Shura's words made Ling Chen's heart jump. The Shura in front of him was the lunar scourge's previous master. The reason he became a Shura was because of the lunar scourge. Then, didn't that mean with the lunar scourge on his body, he would slowly walk towards the path of the Shura? However, you and I are different. The Shura continued to speak. Back then, I was controlled by the lunar scourge, whereas you have taken control of it. Although I became a Shura because of the lunar scourge, unless you are willing, or the lunar scourge is in its complete state, it can only give you its power, and will not be able to force you onto the path of the Shura. You are the first creature that has obtained the lunar scourge without being controlled by it. The Shura's words shocked Ling Chen. The worry and frustration in his heart all died down. Although the lunar scourge could help him become a Shura, if he didn't want to become one, it would not be able to affect him. After all, he was the master of the lunar scourge, not the opposite. Thinking to hear, he gave a sigh of relief and looked up into the Shura's terrifying eyes. Then, because of the lunar scourge, you lost your conscience and humanity, and became a mass murderer, killing countless people. You've probably also endured a lot of pain and suffering. You probably hated a lot, right? Pain and suffering? Hate? Why? The Shura asked him. You should know that there are countless beings that desire for the lunar scourge so that they can become powerful Shuras. Shuras lose their conscience and humanity, but they also forget all pain and suffering, as well as disregard all of the world's laws and rules. They can kill anyone they want, do anything they want. They can disregard any people, any rules, anything at all. Even gods, the sky, or oceans tremble in front of Shuras. Not only do they not experience any pain or suffering, but experience boundless pleasure. Becoming a Shura is one of the things I least regret in my life. Why would I hate it? Ling Chen, moreover, you thought that as long as one has the lunar scourge, they will have the right to become a Shura? The Shura looked at Ling Chen with his eyes. The blood-red stare pierced deep into his soul. Do you know what sort of people have the right to become Shuras? What sort of people have the right to become Shuras? Ling Chen thought for a while, then answered, people who have cut off all emotions. Ha ha ha, the Shura calmly laughed. Perhaps apart from me, every person would give the same answer as you, that only someone who has cut off all emotions can become a Shura. But you are wrong, everyone is wrong. The answer is exactly the opposite. People who have cut off all emotions can never become Shuras. The only people who can become Shuras are those who care, who love, who sympathize the most. The Shura's words hit Ling Chen like a wave. His answer was so incomprehensible that Ling Chen almost couldn't accept it. Shuras were beings that destroyed everything and everyone they saw, and would never show any mercy or sympathy. Surely they'd have to cut off all emotions. 10,000 years ago, the Shura had bathed in the blood of 10% of the Forgotten Continent's creatures. Whenever the people who knew of the Shura thought of him, they would first think of his lack of emotions and sympathy. However, the Shura in front of him said that those who had cut off all emotions would never be able to become Shuras. Instead, only those who cared, who loved, who sympathized the most would be able to become Shuras. Ling Chen simply could not understand the reasons for such an answer. If anyone else gave this answer, he would take it as a joke. However, the person who had uttered such words was a real Shura. You can't believe it, right? You don't need to believe it. One day, when you become a Shura too, you will truly understand and accept what I have just said, the Shura slowly said. I definitely will not become a Shura. Ling Chen shook his head. I don't have any reasons to become a Shura, and I can never accept myself becoming that sort of person. Right now, you indeed don't have any reasons for becoming a Shura. However, whether or not there will be reasons in future, no one knows. No one can fight against fate, even Shuras or people destined to become Shuras. Since you have obtained the Lunar Scourge, your fate is destined to be changed by the Lunar Scourge. Perhaps when the Lunar Scourge is complete again, you will find a reason to become a Shura. Ling Chen shook his head once again. I don't have that many desires, nor do I need that much power. The reason I came to this world was just to return a favor. The reason I obtained this Lunar Scourge was simply an accident. I admire Shuras, but becoming a Shura is simply not in line with my goals. To be able to see a real Shura, I am already satisfied. Ha ha ha, the Shura once again laughed, but this time it was not as calm, but rather contained some sort of deep meaning. A real Shura would not laugh, because they would not have any emotions. Ling Chen concluded that in front of him was not a true Shura, but rather a person who had the last bits of the Shura's power. Well, since this is what you believe, keep believing it. What will happen in future, only time will tell. The Shura raised his head and looked at the dark sky. The time I have left isn't long. To be able to see the endless sky 10,000 years after being killed, I am already satisfied. He looked down towards Ling Chen. Young man, you possess the Lunar Scourge just as I did back then. You are also the only human I've seen since I've been woken up. Perhaps this was all arranged by fate. There are many things I want to say to you and the Lunar Scourge, but I simply do not have much time left. Before my soul dissipates, can you please agree to one final wish of mine? I will give you a suitable compensation in return. A final wish from a Shura. This sort of name caused Ling Chen's heart to beat excitedly and he vigorously nodded. If I have the power to do it, I will definitely fulfill your wish. Very good. The Shura nodded his head. At that moment, Ling Chen suddenly saw on his blood-stained face a trace of warmness, as if 10,000-year-old ice was thawing. Please bring my bones to my hometown, and bury me in front of my wife's grave. The Shura's bones were buried in this moon god ruins. However, Ling Chen did not have to look for them, because they were already in Ling Chen's field of vision. They were the things that Ling Chen had tripped over when he was running from the shadow demon beast. I've already told Tao Tai that the danger has passed, and he doesn't need to come anymore. Immediately take the Shura's bones and leave. Although the Shura only released his power for a very short period of time, that's enough for the moon god representative of the Forgotten Continent to detect him, so she will be here soon. Chi-Yu said. Ling Chen nodded his head and walked towards the Shura's bones. The Shura's body was incredibly tough and durable. Although 10,000 years had passed, his bones were still in perfect condition, without any blemish or cracks. Northwest of the Azure Dragon City, Peace Town, little friend, do you know anyone with the surname Qi Xian? TLN, Qi Xian was originally translated by the first translator as Red Mystical, as in Red Mystical Sword King, but apparently it was the Shura's surname. Seeing a stranger, the little boy immediately ran away. Excuse me everyone, has anyone heard of someone with the last name Qi Xian? Qi Xian? There's such a last name? Never heard of it before. After walking around in the village for a long time and asking many people, he found that all the villagers had no idea about the last name Qi Xian. Many things could change in 10,000 years. Perhaps the Qi Xian family had already disappeared and had been forgotten by everyone. However, Ling Chen did not give up. He found out where the town mayor lived, and went to find him. Since this village still existed, perhaps there were still records of Qi Xian. Hello town mayor, can I inquire about something with you? In your town, has there ever been anyone with the surname Qi Xian? Standing in front of the town mayor, Ling Chen began to question him. Qi Xian. Hearing this name, an expression of shock appeared on the village chief's face. He looked at Ling Chen closely, then replied, "A long, long time ago, there was a family called Qi Xian here. However, that family always quite small, and I think disappeared about 1,000 years ago. As such, this surname also disappeared. I read about this recently in our town's records." "Young man, why do you know this surname? Perhaps you have some sort of connection to this family? In this world, there already aren't any people with the surname Qi Xian anymore?" Ling Chen sighed in his mind. This result was very disappointing, but not surprising. After all, 10,000 years had passed. Then, did the Qi Xian family leave anything behind? Ling Chen determinedly asked. Unfortunately, no, the town mayor shook his head. However, if you want to pay your respects to the Qi Xian family's ancestors, there's a place. Where? Ling Chen's eyes lit up. It's at the center of Peace Town. Below our sacred object, the Peace Tree. Legend has it that the Peace Tree was blessed by a peerless, powerful expert, and has an infinite lifespan. Up until today, it has lived for over 10,000 years, and yet, it is still thriving. The legends also say that a long, long time ago, there was a terrible catastrophe in the Forgotten Continent, causing all of the surrounding villages and towns to be eradicated. Only our town was kept safe. Everyone says that it was the Peace Tree that kept us safe. As such, that tree was named the Peace Tree, and has always protected the peace and safety of our town up till now. In the Peace Town records, the Peace Tree was planted by the Qi Xian family's first ancestor. After the first generation ancestors died, they were buried there. At that time, the Shura destroyed almost all of the east side of the Forgotten Continent. Everywhere around Peace Town for 100 miles had been reduced to ruins. Only Peace Town had been kept safe, without any loss at all. Got it, thank you town mayor. Ling Chen immediately turned around and headed straight for the center of the town. The Shura's voice slightly trembled. This Shura who had caused terror to the entire Forgotten Continent, he too had things that were hard to look back on. This tree was planted by myself and my wife. Back then, it was only a seedling. My wife and I transferred some of our power into this tree so that it could quickly grow, as well as gave it an infinite lifespan, symbolizing how our love for each other would never wither or die. The Shura spoke in a reminiscent tone as he gazed at the gigantic tree. 10,000 years had passed, and the tiny seedling had grown into an enormous tree. However, he and his beloved had long since been separated. It seems that you truly loved your wife, so why were you willing to become a Shura? Ling Chen asked. When I became a Shura, my wife had already died. I personally buried her under this tree. At that time, my greatest desire was that after I died, would be buried under this tree as well. Although we could not keep each other company in life, we could at least be together in death. Ling Chen's heart was slightly moved. For the past 10,000 years, this Shura, who could destroy anything he wished, only had one wish, which was to be buried under this tree to be with his dead wife. Was this really the Shura that had killed 10% of all creatures in the Forgotten Continent? Only those who cared, who loved and sympathized the most could become Shuras. Was this why he became a Shura? In that case, what was the true meaning of a Shura? Could it be that everything people knew about Shuras was wrong? Can you tell me why you were willing to become a Shura? Ling Chen took a step forwards, and asked the question that had been burning on his mind. The Shura stayed silent and continued to gaze at the giant tree. He seemed to be reminiscing about memories from the past, but did not answer Ling Chen. Young man, thank you for bringing me here. Being able to be buried with her, I can now rest in peace. The greatest joy in my life was meeting her, and the thing I regret least is becoming a Shura. If I could go back in time, I would throw away my sword and spend as much time with her as possible. Swish! The Shura flicked with his finger, and a deep pit appeared next to Ling Chen. The Shura's bones then floated into the pit, after which the pit was filled, not leaving a single trace of what had just happened. Apart from Ling Chen, no one would know the final resting place of the Shura. No one would know that the terrifying Shura that had surpassed even gods was buried under this tree, without a headstone or a coffin. The only person at his funeral was Ling Chen. And no one knew that it was on this day that the Shura had truly died. "Are you going now?" Ling Chen quietly asked as he saw the Shura's image begin to fade. "That's right, it's time for me to go. Thank you for fulfilling this final wish of mine. This is my reward for you." As the Shura spoke, a white light with a hint of purple appeared in Ling Chen's field of vision. It was a crystal orb about the size of a fist, the color of silver with a bit of purple. It was semi-transparent, and had a symbol that looked like two nines lying horizontally, one flipped from the other. This is the fourth god orb, the Cancer Orb. Chi Yu joyously cried out. This was one of the Lunar Scourge's orbs. Ling Chen stretched out his hand and took hold of the orb. Its size, shape and texture were all the same as the Gemini and Sagittarius orbs. Cancer Orb, type, Energy Orb, grade, Mysterious God, attribute, Lightning. Equipment requirement, can only be slotted in the Lunar Scourge. Effects, all attacks ignore the target's defense, damage reduction and absolute defense. Ling Chen suddenly gripped the Cancer Orb in his hand. This was indeed a Mysterious God Orb. The Cancer Orb allowed him to ignore all defense, including damage reduction and even absolute defense. After the Gemini Orb and Sagittarius Orb, Ling Chen had finally obtained yet another Lunar Scourge Orb. The Cancer Orb once again revealed to Ling Chen just how powerful the orbs of the Lunar Scourge were. Awesome! In such a short time, we've obtained 3 Lunar Scourge Orbs. Chi Yu said in an excited voice. Back then, the Lunar Scourge was not destroyed by the Moon God clan, but all 12 of its God Orbs and the 3 Saint Orbs were scattered. However, the Cancer Orb was secretly kept at the Moon God ruins, hidden by the aura from my bones. Now, it can finally return to where it belongs. Ling Chen excitedly put the Cancer Orb away. Every time he found a Lunar Scourge Orb, his strength had increased by leaps and folds, and this time was no different. He bowed his head as he said, "Thank you Shura, your reward comes as a very pleasant surprise to me." "Thank me?" The Shura's expression was very calm. "Its rightful position is in the Lunar Scourge, and so belongs to you, so why do you need to thank me?" The Shura stretched out his blood-covered hand and pressed it onto Ling Chen's chest. Ling Chen's eyes widened, but he did not move or say anything. The Lunar Scourge was my only companion. Now that I am going to completely disappear, I don't have any way to look over it in its weakened form. The only person who can protect it now is you. However, your power is far too weak. All I can do is give my remaining power to you, so that you can temporarily use my power in dire situations. Give my remaining power to you. Ling Chen looked at the Shura in shock. However, before I do this, I want to give you a piece of advice. The Shura closed his eyes. A blood-red orb of light appeared between his palm and Ling Chen's chest. Within Ling Chen's chest suddenly appeared a sort of chaotic and violent aura. What advice is it? Ling Chen did his best to remain calm as he asked. Do your best to find ways to be able to nullify lightning attacks. Back then, if it wasn't for the divine tribulation lightning, the 3 moon goddesses and the void dragon god would not have been able to harm me at all. Ling Chen, the 3 moon goddesses and the void dragon god would not have been able to harm me at all. Under the heavens, only the Shura had the right to say such arrogant words. At this moment, he was not able to say out loud something like, "I will never become a Shura, so I don't need to worry about this." The blood-red orb of light entered into his body. Farewell, young man. I hope that the Lunar Scourge's light will one day, because of you, cover the land and sky again. The burning hot sensation in Ling Chen's chest suddenly seemed to explode outwards, and spread throughout his body like a rampaging beast. For a few seconds, it felt as his body was going to be ripped apart, but the rampaging energy suddenly subsided, and disappeared without a trace. The Shura's image before him also became almost transparent. Perhaps in the next second, he would disappear completely. Shura, rest in peace. Although I won't become a Shura like you, but I will do my best to protect the lunar scourge. Ling Chen earnestly said. The vanishing image nodded his head, and a voice like a gentle breeze of wind replied, then, farewell. Suddenly, the Shura's calm face suddenly became very shocked. His soft, yet still audible voice sounded in Ling Chen's ears, wait. Your eyes. A breeze blew past, and the Shura's image, as well his incomplete sentence all disappeared. Ding, you have received the skills, Shura's Death Domain, and Shura's Descent. Ling Chen felt a bit stunned as he looked forwards. My eyes? What was the meaning behind the Shura's last sentence? What's with my eyes? The Shura had passed away, so there was no one that could answer his questions. Ling Chen rubbed his eyes. His vision had always been very good, and did not feel that there was anything wrong with them. So what was the meaning behind that, your eyes? Did he mishear the Shura? Ling Chen decided to stop thinking about it. He quickly opened his skills page, and looked at the 2 skills that the Shura had given him. These were 2 skills from the Shura himself. Shura's Death Domain, limited use skill, cannot be upgraded. After the Qi Xian Sword King became a Shura, with his natural talent and comprehension in killing techniques, whenever this skill was used, even the sky and land would be affected. This skill could slay even gods in one strike. Single target attack, and locks onto the target once the skill is activated. Even if the target escapes to the furthest corners of the world, they will not be able to evade the attack. Damage caused is 99,999% of normal attack damage, and is guaranteed to hit, as well as critical and pierce, as well as destroy all equipment below Saint Destroyer grade. Costs 90% of HP and MP to activate. After activating, the user's strength, constitution, agility and spirit will permanently decrease by 30 points and level will decrease by 9 levels. As it only contains the last of the Shura's power, it can only be used twice. Seeing the Shura's Death Domain skill on his skill page, Ling Chen's hands began to shake. His eyes widened as he looked at the skill again and again, scarcely believing his eyes. 99,999% normal attack damage. How could such a monstrous, incomprehensible skill exist? 99,999% normal attack damage, plus critical and pierce. That means with his maximum attack power with his buffs, if he used this skill, he would be able to hit 14 million damage. Ling Chen simply could not believe this. He shook his head, and calculated again and again. No, it indeed was 14 million damage. Despite being only LV-17, this terrifying skill could allow him to cause 14 million damage. This sort of damage could even insta-kill a mysterious god-grade monster of the same level. If his 4 major stats were each reduced by 30 points, his constitution would fall to 1, and spirit to 0. In total, that would be 120 stat points. Normally, this amount of stat points would take him 24 levels to gain. If Ling Chen took off all of his equipment, apart from strength, all of the other 3 stats would fall directly to 0. However, when put in perspective with the power of this skill, the costs didn't seem excessive at all. One day, if he truly was forced to use Shura's Death Domain, the effects would be earth-shattering. The Shura had actually given him such an overwhelmingly powerful skill. Ling Chen immediately looked at the second skill that the Shura had given him. Shura's Descent, limited use skill, cannot be upgraded. Summons Shura to aid in battle for 60 seconds, can only be used once. Ling Chen. Having seen how overpowered the Shura's death domain was, Ling Chen could not believe that there could be an even more powerful skill in existence. However, this skill had immediately appeared before his eyes. Summoning the Shura, the significance of this skill was not given enough justice by those few words. Even a hack would be put to shame. The Shura was definitely the most powerful being that had ever existed. With this skill, it was pretty much equivalent to Ling Chen having the power of a Shura for a whole minute. Was this some sort of bug? Even if he was facing off against the Moon God clan, he would not have to fear them with this skill. It was obvious that the reason the Moon God clan had never entered the Moon God ruins after the Shura's devastation was because they did not want to remember the tragic and fearful memories they had of the Shura. Shura's death domain, and Shura's descent, were the most help the Shura could give Ling Chen before he disappeared. Despite having only met Ling Chen for the first time, the reason he gave Ling Chen these things was because of the Lunar Scourge. Raising his right hand, Ling Chen looked at the Lunar Scourge, as well as its additional attributes: Heaven's Wrath, the way of the Shura, there is no return, determined to walk this path, Heaven's Wrath you will suffer. Today, Ling Chen finally understood the meaning of this sentence. The Lunar Scourge was an ancient evil item forged by the highest moon god from the resentment, hatred, blood aura, death aura, and remnant power of gods, devils, humans, demons, beasts and spirits that died in the war of gods and devils, gathering countless sins, sanguinity, hatred and cruelty in one, the fusion of endless negativity. When it was forged, darkness covered the sky and land. The Lunar Scourge's energy made it the evilest, most cursed item in existence. Its power could cause the being to which it was bonded to go down the path of the terrifying Shura. In that case, that day at the bottom of the cliff at the novice village, if he did not conquer the Lunar Scourge, but was instead conquered by it, then when the Lunar Scourge became complete, he would have been forced onto the path of the Shura. After completing the War God's trials and receiving the War God's power, before he disappeared, the War God seemed shocked, and said something like, "Wait. This power on your body." Thinking back to this, Ling Chen realized that the War God had probably detected the Lunar Scourge on his body, and had been shocked. The Shura existed because of the Lunar Scourge. Although there were still some people who knew of the name Shura, there were barely any people left who knew of the name Lunar Scourge. Regardless, he was now the master of the Lunar Scourge. Even if he wanted to get rid of it, he still wouldn't be able to. After all, it not only was bonded to him, but he had just made a vow to the Shura to protect the Lunar Scourge. As such, since he had no choice, he could only continue walking on this path. After all, the Shura had said that since Ling Chen was the one in control, even if the Lunar Scourge became complete again, it would still only give him power, as opposed to control him. Ling Chen took out the intermediate energy stone in the 4th socket of the Lunar Scourge and transferred it to the 10th socket, then put the Cancer Orb into the 4th socket. Ding! Cancer Orb slotting successful. All of your physical attacks will ignore 100% of defense, ignore physical damage reduction and will ignore absolute defense. Ding! Lunar Scourge's exclusive lunar skill, Moon Flare, has been unlocked. With the Cancer Orb on the Lunar Scourge, all of Ling Chen's physical attacks would ignore any and all defense. Thus, no matter if it was gold, celestial, mysterious god or even Saint Destroyer equipment, all of their defensive capabilities meant nothing in front of Ling Chen. Even if it was one of the 5 Saint Destroyer beasts, he would still be able to pierce through their defense and reduce their HP. In front of the Cancer Orb, all defense was simply like clouds. On his stats page, Ling Chen's pierce rate had directly increased to 100%. After the Cancer Orb had been socketed, the Lunar Scourge's second exclusive skill had been unlocked. Just Moon Shadow alone had helped Ling Chen immeasurably and saved him many, many times. This new skill, Moon Flare, was sure to be as useful as Moon Shadow. Moon Flare, Lunar Scourge's exclusive skill, when cast it will release a brilliant light, blinding all creatures within range. Effect: Ignores blindness resistance, and all targets within X meters gain the blindness status, X equals current level X2. The effects last for 5 seconds with no mana cost. Cooldown, 60 seconds. So it turned out that the Moon Flare was an AoE attack that caused all targets, within the AoE that was double the size of Moon Shadows, to lose their sight temporarily. Although it would not be as useful as Moon Shadow in 1v1 battles, but in large team battles, if cast on the enemy, it would throw them into chaos, and they might even attack each other. When facing off against a powerful enemy, using Moon Shadow then Moon Flare, or Moon Flare then Moon Shadow, would probably boundlessly infuriate the enemy. No less than what was expected from the Moon Shadow, no matter if it was its exclusive orbs or exclusive skills, Ling Chen was never disappointed. In just 10 or so days, Little Master has found 3 Lunar Scourge God Orbs. Little Master, I think I'm falling for you more and more. Chi Yu gave a flirtatious laugh. The happiest person in obtaining this new orb was her. Ling Chen slightly frowned. His voice was not as excited as Chi Yu's, and was instead a lot more serious. Chi Yu, you never told me that the Shura's existence was because of the Lunar Scourge. Hee, that can only happen when the Lunar Scourge has at least 12 of its exclusive orbs. So, before Little Master has gathered 12 orbs, there's no reason for me to say it. Otherwise, Little Master might be too worried and may not be as enthusiastic about finding the orbs. There were simply too many things that Chi Yu was hiding from him. Come to think of it, even now, he still didn't know about Chi Yu's true background, or if that even was her real name. He decided to stop questioning her, because he knew she wouldn't give him a proper answer even if he continued to ask. Instead, he took out a black piece of jade from his bag. The piece of jade was jet black, without any scratches or damage. On the back, there was a very small, shadow, character engraved. This was something he had picked up at the Moon God ruins before delivering the Shura's bones to the Peace Tree. It was the only thing that had dropped from the Shadow Demon Beast, and was almost exactly the same as the piece of jade that the War Demon Beast had dropped at the Lonely Spirit Ridge. Demon Jade Hook, Shadow, jade that the Shadow Demon Beast carries. It is said that it was given to him by the then Demon Emperor. Unable to determine what material it is made of and its use. Indeed, it was almost exactly the same as the jade from before. The only difference was that instead of war, it was engraved with the character for shadow. At the Moon God ruins, he had encountered grave danger of a completely unexpected degree. The surprises he had found there, such as the Shadow Demon Beast, or the Shura and the Cancer Orb, were so unbelievable that Ling Chen felt that he had been in a dream. He had brought the Shura's bones to his hometown, and buried him with his wife. Ling Chen had finally completed his adventures in the Moon God ruins. He had also greatly benefited, with the rewards being thousands of times better than he had expected. Goodbye, Shura. To be able to meet such a legendary figure like yourself, as well as receive your help, I feel incredibly honored. Perhaps the reason you want me to become a Shura, as well as advised me to find a way to increase my resistance to lightning was because you didn't want to see the power of the Lunar Scourge wasted. However, I am different from you. I'm not from this world, and there is someone who I must protect. Even if I can attain unlimited power, I will not let myself become like you, so I'm sorry, but I'll have to disappoint you. Ling Chen lightly waved towards the place where the Shura was buried, and took out a teleport scroll. He shattered it, and returned to Azure Dragon City, then went directly to the mayor's residence. The last part of the Moon God Ruins quest was to report to the Azure Dragon's mayor about all he had investigated. The origin of the mournful weeping was very clear. It was because of the Shadow Demon Beast using his darkness power to control the bodies of the dead Moon God representatives as his puppets. As such, this produced the mournful weeping from the undead Moon God representatives. As long as he told all this to the Azure Dragon's mayor, this last quest of the 4 mega quests would be completed. Escape? That's completely impossible. Of course I died there and revived in town. After all, we players can revive after we die. Ling Chen calmly replied as he maintained a perfect poker face. Of course he couldn't tell the Azure Dragon's mayor that the Shura had appeared and saved him. If this was reported to the Moon God clan, Ling Chen figured that he'd be invited to have a cup of tea with the Moon God clan. True, true. It is, after all, one of the 10 ancient demon beasts. No wonder no one who had gone before had come back alive. Against the powerful shadow demon beast, the only ones who would be able to come back to report of it would be you players. I must report this to the Emperor, so that he can tell all of the Forgotten Continent's citizens not to go near. The Azure Dragon's mayor earnestly replied. N. Ling Chen nodded his head, then continued, although, Mr. Mayor doesn't have to be too worried. The shadow demon beast should know that we players can revive, and thus the information of it hiding there has already been exposed by me. Therefore, in order to prevent the Moon God clan from finding it, it has probably left already. The Azure Dragon's mayor pondered for a while, then slowly nodded his head. What you said is true. Although, I still need to report this to the Emperor. That's right, last time when I told the Emperor that you had received the War God's power he was very pleased. Now that you've achieved yet another great feat, he probably has a very good impression of you. In future, when you reach the Forgotten City, perhaps the Emperor will summon you. I would be honored. Ling Chen slightly smiled. As the Emperor ruling over all humans in the Forgotten Continent, he was not someone any player could just go meet. He added, so that's what I saw in the Moon God ruins. Also, Mr. Mayor, there's something I want to ask you about. Oh? What is it? Well, Ling Chen thought about what he was going to ask, then continued, Mr. Mayor, do you know where the Vermilion Bird resides? Vermilion Bird? The Azure Dragon's mayor stared at him. Why do you want to find the Vermilion Bird? There are some things I want the Vermilion Bird to help me with. Ling Chen said after some thought. Ask the Vermilion Bird for help? The Azure Dragon's mayor looked at Ling Chen as if he was an idiot. The Vermilion Bird is the Vermilion Bird City's guardian beast. It only appears in the Forgotten Continent's east when there are disasters, and never easily appears in front of humans. Come to think of it, the last time the Vermilion Bird appeared was at least 1,000 years ago. You want the Vermilion Bird to help you? You might as well as ask Buddha. To be fair, anyone who Ling Chen asked in the entire Forgotten Continent would have answered him like he was a retard too. Alright then, but all I need is for you to tell me where the Vermilion Bird is. Ling Chen helplessly said. No idea. The Azure Dragon's mayor shook his head. How can normal humans know of where a guardian beast lives? However, if there's one person who knows where it lives, that would be the Vermilion Bird's mayor. Each of the 4 major cities' mayor has a way to contact the guardian beast, but can only contact them during disasters. If you really want to find the Vermilion Bird, your best bet is to ask the Vermilion Bird's mayor. However, even if he knows, he probably won't tell you. Not being able to obtain any useful information from the Azure Dragon's mayor was pretty much what Ling Chen had expected. Got it, thank you Mr. Mayor. Goodbye. And, goodbye, don't forget about that 1.4 million gold that you owe me. As he walked out of the mayor's residence, a system announcement sounded in his ears. Ding, you have successfully completed the quest Moon God Ruins, Fame plus 300, SP plus 500, each of the 4 major stats plus 3, received 1, skill copy scroll. Having finished reporting to the Azure Dragon's mayor, Ling Chen had completed the Moon God Ruins quest. For such an impossible quest, there were quite handsome rewards. Not only was there large amounts of fame and SP, but also 12 stat points in total. Moreover, there was some sort of special scroll. Skill copy scroll? Ling Chen had never heard of such a name before. Could it be a scroll that allowed one to steal skills from other people? Ling Chen took the scroll out of his bag and looked at its attributes. Skill copy scroll, a mysterious scroll that allows the user to copy a target's skills. When used, the user can choose one skill to copy from the target. The target must be within the user's field of vision. Cannot copy limited use skills, passive skills, or evolved skills. The copied skill will start from LV1. Disappears after use. TLN, an evolved skill is a skill that has reached a certain level and has been significantly upgraded/evolved. So there really was this sort of godly scroll, it was just like what its name suggested. Ling Chen's mind reeled. He doubted that he would ever be able to find such a scroll, so he would have to put this one to good use by copying a powerful skill. To date, the most powerful skills he had seen were obviously the Shura's Death Domain and Shura's Descent, but he already had these two skills, and they were both limited use skills. Thus, apart from those two skills, the strongest skill he had seen was. After thinking for a while, Ling Chen put the scroll away. He looked at the time, it was already past 10 p.m. After entering the Moon God ruins, encountering the Shadow Demon Beast and the Shura, as well as taking the Shura's bones back to his hometown, it had become quite late. He was glad that he had prepared dinner for Shui Ruo in advance. After logging out, Ling Chen left the mystic moon world. He opened his eyes, and found that the room was in total darkness. He subconsciously stretched out his hand to the side, but could not find Shui Ruo's body. Ruo Ruo. Ling Chen sat up, and softly called out for her, but did not get a reply. He saw that the light in the living room was still on. He hurriedly jumped down from the bed, and walked into the living room. Ling Shui Ruo sat against the sofa, her eyes closed, while breathing gently. Her jet-black hair cascaded down her shoulders, and shone under the light in the living room. Although her sleeping position didn't look too natural, it still made Ling Chen stand and appreciate how beautiful she was. In front of her, on the table, were many plates of delicious-looking food, but not the ones that Ling Chen had prepared. From how the plates of dishes were placed, as well as the aesthetic way the dishes looked, it was obvious how lovingly and carefully the one who cooked the dishes had been. However, all of this looked untouched. There was only one explanation. The corners of his eyes became slightly moist, and Ling Chen almost wanted to slap himself a few times. Ling Chen's cooking was superb, and in the past Shui Ruo had learnt from him, earnestly saying that she wanted to cook for him for the rest of his life. However, after she had been diagnosed with the Isrock disease, she had not been able to cook a single meal for him. Shui Ruo, who had finally recovered from the Isrock disease, had secretly decided to cook for him today. She had waited for him to come out of the game so that they could eat together. And so she waited, and waited, and waited, until she had finally fallen asleep. This goddamn quest. Ling Chen cursed in his mind. He quietly walked over, and silently gazed at Shui Ruo, his heart filled with warmth and love. He reached out, and put his arm around her. Shui Ruo slowly woke up. She opened her diamond-like eyes, and started to smile. Big brother. You've finally come out. You must be hungry, right? Today, I made dinner for you too. Ling Chen nodded his head as he looked lovingly at her. It's just that. I haven't cooked in a long, long time, so I don't know how it'll taste. Big brother, have a taste. Ling Shui Ruo looked at Ling Chen nervously and expectantly, as well as joyously that she had finally cooked for him. Ling Chen smiled. As long as it's made by Ruo Ruo, it'll definitely be the most delicious food made in the world. Ling Chen picked up a bowl of congee that was, surprisingly, still warm. While waiting for Ling Chen, Shui Ruo must have had to reheat the food many times. Ling Chen scooped a spoonful into his mouth. Is it nice? Shui Ruo looked at Ling Chen in anticipation. Ling Chen vigorously nodded his head, then brought another spoonful of congee to her lips. How can congee made by Ruo Ruo not be delicious? Here, I'm sure you're hungry too. Feed me, big brother. Shui Ruo batted her eyelashes at him, and gave a mischievous smile. She slightly closed her eyes. Seeing this beautiful girl in front of him, Ling Chen gently smiled. Over the years, he had often wondered why he had been so unlucky in this life, yet so lucky at the same time. To be able to meet Shura and be by her side was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He put down the bowl of kanji and lifted his hands, gently holding her face in his hands. He slightly leaned forward, and gave her a gentle kiss on the lips. Shura's lips were soft and moist. Being suddenly kissed by Ling Chen, she did not move back, but instead eagerly wrapped her arms around him. She moved her head forwards, and tightly pressed her lips against his. Her breathing was rapid and short, and it wasn't until Ling Chen noticed that he had kissed her to the point where she had difficulty catching her breath that he controlled himself, forcing himself to separate from her. Sitting up, Shura's naked top was aligned with his line of sight. This wasn't the first time he has seen her body, but even so, he was still awed by her beauty. For the past couple of years, Shura had had a weak body, suffering from Isrock disease. He didn't dare do anything that could jeopardize her condition, although recently, she had been recovering fairly well and her condition appeared to be improving. Even so, he still couldn't get with her under such conditions. His sight lingered on her beautiful body, eventually resting upon her chest. Her breasts were perked, her nipples hard. He had played with them countless times before, but as with every time, he still couldn't help but praise the creator of those breasts. He reached out his hands, placed them on Shura's breasts and began to slowly and gently rub them. Shura's cheeks flushed red as her sensitive body was caressed under Ling Chen. She could not help but release a moan, parting her lips slightly, revealing 2 rows of jaded teeth. She raised her head and pouted her lips. Her eyes glistened as she gazed at him. "Big brother, are you going to eat Rua?" Ling Chen let out a chuckle before he reached out both hands and sat her up on his knees. "There will be a time when I will eat Rua up, but before then, we should fill our stomachs first." He had one arm around Shura's waist, holding her in place while the other hand reached for the chopsticks. He enjoyed the feel of her body against his as he feasted on the handmade dinner she had made for him. To him, this happiness was like no other in the world. World of Mystic Moon today was not destined to be a peaceful day. In fact, it could be said to be the liveliest day since the opening of Mystic Moon. This was because at midnight today, the money exchange system between the world of Mystic Moon and the real world would be officially open. Players would be able to exchange between Chinese yuan and game currency at a 1-to-1 exchange rate. The process was fairly easy. There wasn't any need to go to a specialist for such matters, and it was an automatic system that could be done with one's own personal bank details. As a player's initial city, Azure Dragon City would have drastic changes from today onwards. Players belonging to commercial facilities, recreational facilities, residential facilities would begin to rise in power and truly start to immerse themselves into the world of Mystic Moon. On the massive money exchange day, all of the players, including those from overseas, would have all their attention placed upon the same place, Azure Dragon City's auction hall. Because this was the morning they would auction off China's first piece of guild creation token. The owner of this piece of guild creation token would then decide which guild would become the first official guild in Mystic Moon. The sale for the tickets to the auction was fairly late at night, being scheduled on the day of the auction itself at 1 in the morning just before dawn. The hour after the commencement of the money exchange system, that was when the sale of the auction tickets would begin. Due to the auction of the first guild token luring in players, the auctioneers didn't need to worry about tickets not selling. There was no suspense. All 20,000 entry tickets were sold out in less than half an hour. It was currently 8:15 in the morning. The auction perimeter had already been surrounded by many players as though they were afraid of missing out on the slightest thing. At this point in time, Ling Chen and Shura had only just logged on. "Wow! So pretty, big brother. What's the name of this?" Shura asked, opening the silver casket that was held in Big Brother's hands. Whatever was being held inside emitted such a bright light that it made Shura shout in astonishment. This is called the Moonlight treasure box. Not only does it emit beautiful rays of light, but amongst those rays of light will appear the world's most beautiful image. Rua, you try and observe these rays of light and see if you notice anything, Ling Chen said with a smile. Okay, Rua nodded her head and then very diligently looked at the beautiful rays of light being emitted by the Moonlight treasure box. Every person who looked into the Moonlight treasure box had a different experience. Others would not be able to see what you see, but Ling Chen believed that what Rua would see could only be one thing. Wow! Big Brother, I saw Big Brother. Big Brother is smiling very handsomely. Rua was happy but also bemused, and she continued staring at the image within the light for some time, reluctant to turn away. After a long while, she finally raised her head and shifted her focus onto him. She shouted, "Big Brother, did you put your own image into the light?" Of course not. This Moonlight treasure box's light originates from a very magical stone, a kind of stone that reveals what is in the heart, so when a person looks at these lights, it will portray the image of that person's favorite, most precious person or object, declared Ling Chen with a smile. Then, what Big Brother sees is Rua. Rua blinked at Ling Chen. Of course it is. When I looked into the Moonlight treasure box and saw Rua, I just knew I had to buy it. As long as I had it, even if Rua was not beside me, I could see Rua whenever I wanted. So magical, if only I had a box like this too, then even if Big Brother was not beside me, I would also still be able to see him whenever I wanted. Then, if you really like it, I'll give this box to you, Rua. No way. Ling Rua took a last glance at the Moonlight treasure box, then returned it to Ling Chen's hands and ran off with a smile. I really want to be able to see Big Brother every second and every minute, but I want even more so for Big Brother to be able to see me every second and minute, so that there will never come a day when you will forget about me. Looking at Rua's back, the edges of Ling Chen's mouth slowly curved up into a smile. How could there ever be a day when I will forget you? Even if I were to forget myself, I could never forget you. Every morning, members of Heart's Dream gathered for a meeting at a simple, small house. Ling Chen and Rua would always be the last two to arrive, but after they did, just like in the past, the girls would come forth and surround them. In 2 steps, Xiaoqi jumped to stand in front of Ling Chen and asked eagerly, "Big Brother Ling Chen, we finally finished the quest where you collect red crystal grass. The reward for it is pretty good." "Oh yeah, Big Brother Ling Tian, have you finished the Moon God Ruins quest yet?" "With Big Brother Ling Tian's abilities, you should have finished it already." "Was it very difficult and thrilling?" Ling Chen raised his brows and said, "With me, your Big Brother Ling Tian, personally doing this quest, of course it would be completed. Difficulty and thrills are a must." In Xiaoqi and the rest of the girls' presence, Ling Chen had to make the overview of the Moon God Ruins quest brief. Of course, he definitely couldn't mention the appearance of Shura. Despite only talking about the undead Moon God representatives, the girls continued to listen attentively with all kinds of nervousness and excitement. When he had finally finished recounting his quest, he immediately changed the topic and said, "Meng Xian, this morning's first piece for auction, the Guild Creation Token, do you think it will be worth fighting for?" Meng Xian smiled and shook her head. She didn't speak. To the girls, Ling Chen's words were casual and that of a joke. Xiaoqi said, "We are currently a group of 6, and can only count as a very small guild. We don't have any fame, power, or money, so there's no way for us to fight with the bigger guilds. Yesterday, Big Brother told me about the last time a guild creation token had gone up for sale. It was even more thrilling than watching an actual fight." "Okay." Ling Chen stood, straightening his back and raising his torso. The smile on his face seemed like a smile but at the same time not. "Fellow ladies, are you interested in seeing a snatch war that is more intense and more fierce in comparison to an actual fight?" Of course. Shao-Chi was the first to raise her hand in approval, but her face revealed a sudden discouragement, but the sales for the tickets suddenly opened at midnight, and we were all asleep by that time. I forgot to ask my big brother to buy us a few tickets too, and it would be impossible for us to obtain tickets now. How about I go ask my big brother for a couple of tickets? I think I could get around 6 tickets from him. My elder brother should have some too, said Yun Meng. Although we don't have the right to compete with the others, all the largest guilds will be attending this auction. Moreover, understanding the current power dynamics within our China region is also very important. I agree to going to this auction. Okay, we'll settle on that. We, Heart's Dream, shall gather in the morning for the auction. Ling Chen stood up from his seat and glanced at the time. It was already 8:30, half an hour until the commencement of the auction. With regards to entry tickets, you guys don't need to worry, just leave it to me. Of course, I've made a booking a few days in advance, replied Ling Chen. Casually, he sat down in the middle of the box seat and gave another quick glance around. But that's not important, the auction is about to begin. Watch and have some fun. After saying this, his face lit up with a sinister smile. Yun Meng Xian took a look at Ling Chen, and mused about it. The VIP-only box was located above the hall and positioned above the other seats. The VIP seats were reserved for whoever the auction found to be the most distinguished guest. They were not something that could be bought with money. The box had lit up, and the players below focused their attention on the box. There was much speculation on who was allowed to enter the box. But the box had one-way windows. People on the inside could clearly see the outside, but from the outside they could only see blurry silhouettes. The person who consigned the guild creation token for auction. Could it be? Everyone was all thinking the same thing. After the auction, remember to find out who is in the VIP box, was being whispered throughout the large hall. Long Tianyun is in the center of the third row. There are 2 people beside him, the Sword Emperor to his left, and the Flame Emperor to his right. Long Tianyun always keeps them with him during significant events. Yun Meng Xian indicated towards Long Tianyun with her eyes, and slowly said, the Sword Emperor and Flame Emperor were the top Chinese players in physical attack and magic attack respectively, and both of these players are in the Yan Huang Alliance. Their strength is quite terrifying, and with these 2 people to protect him, Long Tianyun doesn't have to worry about his safety. This was the first time Ling Tian saw Long Tianyun in the game world, sitting in the auction hall's prime location looking ahead with a cutting gaze, cold eyes, and barely a smile on his face. Despite the exceptional loudness around him, he continued to look straight ahead, and even as the VIP box lit up, he didn't turn around to take a look. Elegantly indifferent, unaffected by anything, nothing caught his attention. Regardless of appearance, temperament, power, fame, wealth, background, and strength, one could say he was the best. To marry such a man was something some women couldn't even dream of. After silently staring at Long Tianyun for a few seconds, Ling Chen's eyes revealed subtle bursts of awe. Then he proceeded to examine the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor's whole body was completely wrapped in a cloak, not a single hair nor eyes could be seen. It was as if this person's entire body did not make contact with the light. Staring at the Sword Emperor, Ling Chen furrowed his brow. Who is this person? Suddenly, the Sword Emperor's head turned, and faced Ling Tian's direction. Through a thick black cloth, Ling Chen could feel 2 extremely cold, emotionless eyes staring at him. Ling Chen looked away, he was a little shocked. Although he had a keen sense of perception, it seemed that he may have underestimated the Sword Emperor. What's wrong? The Sword Emperor suddenly caught the attention of Long Tianyun. The Sword Emperor looked back, and fixed those cold eyes to the front, not reacting. Long Tianyun smiled helplessly. Everyone knew that the Sword Emperor was his right-hand man, but what people didn't know, was that other than protecting him, and listening to his commands, the Sword Emperor has never looked him in the eye, and has also never spoken before, not a word. In the 10 years past, no one had ever heard the Sword Emperor speak. All of the Sword Emperor's time had been spent on training in sword skills and gaining knowledge, which had reached a terrifying peak. The Sword Emperor had even cut off all emotions to become more focused. The Sword Emperor became an emotionless, unable to laugh, unable to cry, and unable to speak robot. Those three people are the main leaders of the Skyfall dynasty, Skyfall, against the sky and judging sky. They are also referred to as the three heavenly kings. All three of them were placed in the top 20, on both the heaven rankings and the earth rankings. Amongst them, Skyfall and Against the Sky were both in the top 10 of the player level rankings. The Skyfall dynasty is extremely powerful and is also supported by China's largest financial group. They are one of the greatest contenders for the token. Their biggest rival is the Yan-Huang Alliance. When Yunmeng Xian was nodding, Ling Chen nodded his head, remembering the appearance of these three people. Sitting behind Long Tianyun was Chi-Chi's older brother Xiao Qiufeng, ranked 7th, with the title, Cold Magistrate. He was from the Battle Alliance, which was ranked in China's top 10 overall. A large number of members in the Battle Alliance were from a mafia gang of the real world, and as a result, they were disciplined and capable of acting with sheer ruthlessness. Other people usually try to avoid them, so as to not provoke them. The Battle Alliance can be regarded as a subsidiary of the Yan-Huang Alliance, but in reality they are only half loyal to them. Xiao Qiufeng truly loves the Battle Alliance, and would take on anyone who opposed it, even if that person was Long Tianyun. Yes, yes. Xiao Qi immediately nodded. My brother isn't afraid of anyone, especially Long Tianyun. The Yunhuang Alliance tried to become like a father to the Battle Alliance, but my brother and I refused to have it like that. At the novice village, when Ling Chen met Xiao Qiufeng, he was impressed. To the right of Xiao Qifeng, he saw Yunfeng. He was looking around for something, but what? My brother's alliance was established only 3 years ago, and it has developed very quickly, so it is quite full with newbies, and its strength is lacking, but with belief in the family's financial support and the support of the Yan-Huang Alliance, it will soon rise to power. The leader of the alliance is my brother. In fact, it was because of what my family left behind, that the Yan-Huang Alliance exists. Yunmeng Xian's voice contained a deep frustration. Before Mystic Moon, Yunmeng Xian rarely stepped into the virtual game world. But to chase her impossible dreams, she did her best and worked hard, and came to a deep understanding of the virtual world. Before the auction officially began, she individually pointed out all of the top leaders present to Ling Chen, as well as talked about some general information and personal attributes. Ling Chen committed all of this to memory. Numerous players were anxiously waiting. 9 a.m. had finally come, and a man came out from the back. Around 60 years old, with a thick mustache, body slightly bent, it was the entertaining Lord Fortune. The auction hall quietened down. And all attention was focused on Lord Fortune. Outside the auction house, the media was also recording live on the action. After all, the auction would directly determine the first official guild in China. Would it be the Yan-Huang Alliance or the Skyfall dynasty? Or would it be someone else entirely? Fellow friends from another world, welcome to Azure Dragon City's first public auction in the Auction House City Center. I, Lord Fortune, will be the sole host of this auction, and I will host the auction in its entirety. Everyone here has chosen to be at our city center auction house today, and for that we express our thanks. We also have plenty of reason to believe that this auction will not let you down. Lord Fortune stood on stage, and after giving a brief opening, he got to the point. So, I do not wish to waste any precious time. Let the Azure Dragon City Center public auction officially begin. Under the spotlight, Lord Fortune was completely calm, apparently having done this many times before. This auction will be auctioning 10 items, we believe that each one will be a great surprise. Then, with the start of our auction, the first item is a consumable. A consumable? The answer was quickly before their eyes. On the auction hall's big screen was the properties of the first auction item: dark, strange-smelling beans, weird beans of a strange origin. It is a bean shaped like sheep dung, releasing a weird smell. After eating -100 HP, plus 100 SP, wow, a significant increase in SP, there was an uproar both on the inside and outside of the auction house. All the players were shocked, surprised, and weren't sure if their eyes were seeing something wrong. Consumable items were certainly not unusual, but it was the effect that was unusual. SP is so difficult to attain, and all the players were in short supply. The effect here could be called no less than incredible. As seen from the first auction item, you can directly increase the level of your skills. I've been alive for so many years, and this is the first time I've seen this. 100 points for one use, its value is definitely high, and I hope everyone is aware of this. Now, a consumable that can directly increase one's SP, the starting price is 10,000 gold coins.